You think you know the person sleeping next to you? I certainly did. I live by absolute precision, yet my biggest calculation error was not in a spreadsheet. It was inside the house I had been paying off for 10 years. A midnight call changed everything. A dead body, a shaking wife, and a missing gun. The police called it self-defense, but looking back, I call it the most perfect performance I have ever seen. My name is James Garcia. I am 38 years old, and if you look at my business card, it says I am the head of risk analysis at Apex Global. That is a fancy way of saying that I get paid to be paranoid. I spend my days staring at spreadsheets, calculating probabilities, and predicting worst-case scenarios for billion-dollar mergers. My entire career is built on the premise that nothing is ever as stable as it appears. I look for the microscopic cracks in the foundation before the building collapses. I am the man who checks the lock on the front door 3 times before going to bed. I am the man who reads the terms and conditions. In the corporate world, my skepticism made me a fortune. But in my own home in the quiet suburbs of Oak Creek, Illinois, that professional paranoia simply evaporated. It was my one blind spot. And as any analyst will tell you, the variable you ignore is always the one that destroys the model. Oak Creek is the kind of place that people move to when they want to forget that the rest of the world is chaotic. It is a catalog of the American dream, rendered in high definition. The lawns are manicured to a military standard of precision. The mailboxes are all painted a uniform matte black. It is safe. It is quiet. It is the sort of place where the biggest scandal of the year is usually someone leaving their trash cans out past noon on a Tuesday. We had lived in our 2-story colonial on Elm Street for 10 years. We had paid off more than 60% of the mortgage. It was a fortress of domestic bliss, or at least that is what I told myself every time I pulled into the driveway. My wife Natalie was the architect of that bliss. If I was the cold, hard logic of our marriage, she was the melody. She was a piano teacher, and she conducted her life with the same grace she taught her students. The neighbors adored her. Old Mrs. Higgins across the street would often tell me that I was the luckiest man in Illinois because Natalie always remembered to bring her soup when her arthritis flared up. Natalie was soft where I was sharp. She was patient where I was efficient. And she was the perfect mother to our son Leo. Leo was 8 years old, a bundle of energy and curiosity that usually manifested in scraped knees and a collection of rocks he kept under his bed. That week, however, the house was unnervingly quiet. We had just dropped Leo off at the Eagle Eye Scout Camp 2 days prior. It was his first time away from home for a full week. I remember feeling a distinct pang of anxiety as we drove away from the camp, watching him high-five a counselor. But Natalie had just squeezed my hand. She told me it was good for him. She said boys needed to learn independence. Looking back, I wonder if she was talking about Leo, or if she was clearing the board for what was to come. The atmosphere in the house shifted the moment Leo left. It was not just the silence. It was a strange, vibrating tension like a violin string, pulled just a fraction too tight. It started on a Tuesday afternoon. I had just come home early from the office, intending to surprise Natalie. I walked into the kitchen, loosening my tie, and found her standing by the refrigerator, staring at the calendar. She jumped when I dropped my keys on the counter. It was a sharp, startled movement, not the usual happy greeting. She recovered quickly, flashing that warm smile that usually melted my defenses. She asked me about work. She asked me about the traffic. And then she brought up Chicago. I had a conference scheduled in Chicago starting Thursday. It was a standard quarterly review with the regional directors. However, the weather forecast was predicting a massive storm system moving across the Midwest, and honestly, I just did not want to go. I had planned to call my boss David and ask to do the presentation remotely. Natalie set a cup of tea down in front of me. She ran her hand across my shoulders, her touch light and reassuring. She told me I should go. She said that David was looking at people for the vice president position and that showing face was important. She said I had worked too hard to let a little rain keep me from networking. I told her I would rather stay home with her. I told her we finally had the house to ourselves for the first time in 8 years. She laughed, but the sound did not quite reach her eyes. She told me not to be silly. She said she wanted to do a deep clean of the house before my birthday next week. She said she wanted to reorganize the garage and polish the hardwood floors, and that I would only be in the way. She framed it as a gift to me. She wanted everything to be perfect for when I got back. She wanted me to come home to a pristine house and a celebration. It made sense. That was the problem with Natalie. Everything she did always made perfect sense on the surface. She was a supportive wife pushing her husband to succeed. She was a thoughtful partner preparing a birthday surprise. Why would I question that? Why would I look at the woman who ironed my shirts and think she was plotting something? But my subconscious was trying to warn me. There was a moment, just one small moment, that pricked at my instincts. It was Wednesday evening, the night before I was supposed to leave. I went into the master bedroom to pack my suitcase. The walk-in closet is connected to our bedroom, and inside the closet, bolted to the floor, is a heavy steel safe. We kept the usual things in there, such as passports, birth certificates, a small amount of emergency cash, and an antique watch my father left me. When I walked in, Natalie was kneeling in front of the safe. The door was open. She was punching numbers into the keypad. Beep, 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 beep. I asked her what she was doing. She stiffened. I saw her shoulders tense up before she turned around. She was holding a stack of documents. She told me she was just checking to make sure the insurance policies were up to date. Then, she casually mentioned that she had changed the master code. I stopped folding my shirt. I asked her why she would change the code. We had used the same 4-digit PIN for 10 years. It was the last 4 digits of my social security number. It was easy. It was routine. She stood up and brushed a lock of hair behind her ear. She said she was worried about Leo. She said he was getting older and more curious, and she did not want him guessing the code and playing with the things inside. I looked at her. I reminded her that Leo was at a camp 200 miles away. I reminded her that Leo was 8 years old and cared more about Minecraft than insurance policies. She just shrugged, maintaining that calm, teacher-like demeanor. She said it was for when he got back. She said you can never be too safe. She wrote the new code on a sticky note, handed it to me, and told me to memorize it before she shredded the paper. I took the note. The numbers were random: 7, 2, 9, 4. I memorized it. I threw the paper away. I told myself she was just being a mother. Natalie was always protective. This was just another layer of that protection. I forced my risk analyst brain to shut down. I did not want to be the husband who interrogated his wife over a keypad code. I wanted to be the husband who trusted her. Thursday arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. The air was heavy and thick with humidity. The storm was definitely coming. I loaded my suitcase into the trunk of my sedan. The wind was already picking up, whipping the leaves of the oak trees that lined our driveway. Natalie came out to the porch to see me off. She was wearing a cream-colored cardigan and jeans. She looked beautiful. She looked like the anchor that held my life in place. I kissed her goodbye. Her lips felt cool. I held her for a moment, smelling the lavender detergent she always used. I told her to be safe. I told her to lock the doors. I told her I would call her as soon as I got to the hotel. She pulled back and smiled. That is the image that burned itself into my memory. Natalie, standing on the concrete steps of our porch arms, crossed over her chest, smiling, as I reversed out of the driveway. At the time, I thought it was a look of love. I thought it was the look of a wife who was going to miss her husband. But as I backed the car into the street and glanced one last time in the rearview mirror, the image distorted. The distance made her expression hard to read. She was still smiling, but she had stopped waving. She was just watching, rigid, still. Later, when I replayed that moment in the theater of my mind, I realized what that look actually was. It was not love. It was relief. It was the smile of an actress who had just finished a grueling scene and was waiting for the director to yell, "Cut," so she could finally drop the mask. She was waiting for me to disappear. The drive to Chicago took 3 hours. It should have taken 2, but the rain started halfway through the trip. It was a torrential downpour that turned the highway into a gray smear of water and brake lights. My windshield wipers were working at maximum speed, slapping a frantic rhythm against the glass. I listened to a podcast about market volatility, but I could not focus. A low-grade anxiety was humming in my chest. It felt like I had forgotten something important, like leaving the stove on, but I knew I had not. I checked my mental list. Laptop? Yes. Presentation files? Yes. Phone charger? Yes. So why did I feel like I was making a mistake? I arrived at the Palmer House Hilton in downtown Chicago, just as the streetlights were flickering on. The city was gloomy, battered by the wind coming off Lake Michigan. I checked in, got my keycard, and went up to my room on the 14th floor. The room was nice. It was clean, sterile, and impersonal. It smelled of industrial air freshener. I threw my suitcase on the bed and loosened my tie. The silence in the hotel room was different from the silence in my house. This silence felt lonely. I looked at my watch. It was 9 in the evening. I needed to hear her voice. I needed to ground myself. I needed Natalie to tell me that she had ordered Thai food and was watching her favorite reality show. I needed the normalcy to chase away the weird feeling in my gut. I sat on the edge of the bed and dialed the home landline. We still kept a landline because the cell service in Oak Creek could be spotty during storms. I listened to the ringtone. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings, then a busy signal. I frowned. That was odd. Natalie rarely used the landline for long conversations. She mostly used her cell phone. Maybe she had knocked it off the hook. I dialed her mobile number. It went straight to voicemail. "Hi, you have reached Natalie. I am probably teaching a lesson right now. Leave a message." Her cheerful recorded voice felt like a mockery in the quiet hotel room. I hung up and waited 10 minutes. I walked to the window and looked out at the rain lashing against the city skyline. I told myself she was probably in the shower. Or maybe she was vacuuming and did not hear the phone. She said she was going to clean, right? I called the landline again at 9:15, busy signal. I called at 9:30, busy signal. The rational part of my brain, the risk analyst, started to construct scenarios. Maybe the storm had damaged the lines. It happened. Telephone lines in the suburbs were vulnerable to falling branches. That was the most probable explanation. The probability of a line going down during a storm of this magnitude was roughly 30%. But the other part of my brain, the husband, was not looking at statistics. I was picturing the empty house. I was picturing the changed safe code. I was picturing the way she practically pushed me out the door. Why was the line busy? A downed line usually just rang, or went dead. A busy signal meant the receiver was off the hook, or someone was talking. Who would she be talking to at 9:30 at night for 45 minutes? I paced the small room. I turned on the television to drown out the silence, but I kept the volume low. I sat on the bed staring at my phone. I sent her a text message, made it to the hotel, tried calling. "Is everything okay? Love you." I watched the screen. Delivered. I waited for the read receipt. Natalie always had her read receipts on. She was compulsive about checking messages. 1 minute passed. 5 minutes passed. The text remained delivered, but not read. My heart rate was climbing. I could feel it thumping against my ribs. This was ridiculous. I was a grown man, a professional, spiraling into panic because my wife missed a call. She was probably asleep. She had been tired. She worked hard. I decided to take a shower. I needed to wash off the drive and the paranoia. I told myself that when I got out of the shower, there would be a text waiting for me. She would say, "Sorry, fell asleep on the couch," and I would feel like an idiot. I stood under the hot water for 20 minutes. I scrubbed my skin until it was red. I tried to focus on the presentation for tomorrow. I rehearsed my opening lines about quarterly projections and risk mitigation strategies. When I stepped out of the bathroom, steam trailing behind me, the first thing I did was look at my phone on the nightstand. The screen was dark. No notifications, no missed calls, no texts. It was now 10:15 in the evening. I sat on the bed, a towel wrapped around my waist, water dripping from my hair onto the carpet. The silence of the room felt heavier now. It felt oppressive. I picked up the phone again. I dialed the home number one more time. Beep, beep, beep. Still busy. I dialed her cell phone. "Hi, you have reached Natalie." I hung up before the beep. I was not just uneasy anymore. I was scared. Not the kind of fear you get from a horror movie, but a cold, sinking dread that settles in the pit of your stomach. It was the feeling of knowing that the numbers in the spreadsheet were not adding up, and no matter how many times you refreshed the page, the error remained. I laid back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. I told myself I would wait until morning. If she did not answer by 7 in the morning, I would call the neighbor, Mr. Henderson. He had a spare key. He could check on her. I turned off the lamp. The room plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the faint orange glow of the city lights bleeding through the curtains. I closed my eyes, trying to force sleep. I tried to picture Natalie sleeping peacefully in our bed, the sheets pulled up to her chin. But every time I drifted toward sleep, I saw her face in the rearview mirror. I saw that smile, that frozen, relieved smile, and I heard the beep of the safe keypad. 7, 2, 9, 4. I did not know it then, but that silence was the last moment of peace I would ever have. The phone was sitting on the nightstand next to my head, a black rectangle of dormant plastic. I was waiting for it to ring, and at the same time, I was praying that it wouldn't. Because somewhere deep down, beneath the logic and the rationality, I knew that the next time that phone rang, my life, as James Garcia, the boring risk analyst from Oak Creek, would be over. I lay there in the dark, listening to the rain, waiting for the sound that would shatter my world. The digital clock on the bedside table read 11:45 at night. I was floating in that murky gray space between consciousness and sleep. The hotel room was cold. The air conditioner hummed with a mechanical rattle that had been annoying me for the last hour, but exhaustion was finally winning. My body was heavy. My thoughts were fragmenting into nonsensical images. Spreadsheets turning into rain. Natalie's smile dissolving into static. Then the phone rang. It was not the hotel landline. It was my cell phone sitting on the nightstand right next to my ear. The sound was violent in the quiet room. It cut through the air like a siren. I jerked awake, my heart slamming against my ribs before I even opened my eyes. I scrambled for the phone, knocking a glass of water onto the floor. It shattered, but I did not care. I grabbed the device, the screen blindingly bright in the darkness. The name on the display made my stomach drop. Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson did not call people. He was 72 years old. He lived next door to us in a bungalow that smelled permanently of mothballs and old newspapers. He spent his days peeking through his blinds, noting down license plate numbers of cars that parked too close to his driveway. He was a man of strict routine and even stricter boundaries. If he was calling me on my cell phone at 1:45, the world had gone wrong. I swiped the green icon. My hand was shaking. "Hello?" My voice was thick with sleep and fear. "James." His voice was unrecognizable. It was high, breathless, and trembling. I had never heard a man sound so completely undone. "James, you need to come back. You need to come back right now." I sat up, the sheets tangling around my legs. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. "Mr. Henderson, what is it? What is going on?" "It is the house, James." "Oh God, the house." He was gasping like he had just run a marathon. "I heard glass breaking. It was so loud, like a bomb went off. And then the pops. James, I heard the pops." My blood turned to ice. "What pops? What are you talking about?" "Gunshots," he whispered, the words strangling him. 3 of them, maybe 4. I called 911. They are here now. The whole street is awake. I was already out of bed. I was standing in the middle of the hotel room in my boxers, but I could not feel the cold anymore. I could not feel anything but a screaming panic rising in my throat. "Natalie!" I choked out. "Where is Natalie?" There was a pause on the other line, a hesitation that lasted only a second but felt like an hour. "I saw them bring the stretcher out," Henderson said, his voice cracking. "They moved fast, James. They moved so fast. I did not see her face. They had it covered." The word hit me like a physical blow to the chest. I staggered back, hitting the wall. The room spun. "Is she alive?" I screamed into the phone. "Mr. Henderson, is she alive?" "I don't know, son. I don't know. Just get here. The police are taping everything off. They are taping off the garage." The line went dead. I stared at the phone. My brain had stopped processing information. It was stuck on a loop. Stretcher, covered, gunshots. Stretcher, covered, gunshots. Then the adrenaline hit. It was a chemical explosion in my veins. I did not pack. I did not brush my teeth. I did not check out of the hotel. I threw my clothes on, buttoning my shirt wrong, skipping loops, tucking it in halfway. I shoved my feet into my shoes, without untying the laces, crushing the heels. I grabbed my wallet and my keys and I ran. I sprinted down the hallway, ignoring the startled look of a maid pushing a cart. I mashed the button for the elevator, punching it over and over again as if the force of my thumb could make the machinery move faster. When the doors finally slid open, I felt like I was trapped in a coffin. The descent to the lobby took an eternity. Every ding of the floor counter was a hammer to my temple. I burst out into the valet area. The wind hit me instantly. The storm that had been threatening all evening had fully unleashed itself. Rain was coming down in sheets sideways, stinging my face like gravel. "My car!" I yelled at the valet attendant, tossing him my ticket. "Get my car, now!" The kid looked at me wide-eyed. He saw the wild look in my eyes, the half-buttoned shirt, the sheer desperation radiating off me. He did not argue. He ran. When he pulled my sedan around, I ripped the door open and threw myself into the driver's seat. I peeled out of the hotel driveway, the tires screeching against the wet pavement, narrowly missing a taxi. I hit the highway and drove straight into hell. The drive from Chicago to Oak Creek is supposed to be a boring, predictable commute. Tonight, it was a gauntlet. The rain was torrential. It smashed against the windshield with such violence that the wipers were useless. They were just smearing the water around, creating a blur of gray and black. I could barely see 10 feet in front of me. I drove anyway. I buried the accelerator into the floor mat. The engine screamed as the RPM needle climbed into the red. The speedometer ticked past 80, then 90, then 100 miles per hour. The car hydroplaned twice the steering wheel, going weightless in my hands as the tires lost contact with the road. Both times I corrected the skid with a terrifying instinct, not slowing down for a second. If I crashed, I crashed. I did not care. The only thing that mattered was the house on Elm Street. My phone was in the cup holder. I put it on speaker. "Call Natalie." The artificial voice of the assistant chirped, calling Natalie Mobile. Ring, ring, ring. "Hi, you have reached Natalie. I am probably teaching a lesson right now. Leave a message." I hung up. I slammed my hand against the steering wheel. "Call Natalie. Ring, ring, ring. Hi, you have reached Natalie." I called her 15 times. 15 times I listened to that cheerful, recorded voice. That voice that sounded so alive, so happy, so completely unaware that her husband was doing 100 miles per hour in a hurricane to find out if she was dead. Every time the voicemail picked up, the knot in my stomach tightened. Why wasn't she answering? If she was hurt, she would have her phone. If she was safe, she would be calling me. The silence was the worst answer she could give me. I tried the house landline. Busy signal. Still. I tried to call the local sheriff's station. I knew the Sheriff Jim Miller. We played poker sometimes at the Rotary Club. He would tell me, He would tell me it was a mistake. "We are sorry. All circuits are busy. Please try your call again later." I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. It bounced off the leather and fell onto the floor mats. I screamed, a raw guttural sound that was swallowed by the noise of the rain and the engine. My mind began to cannibalize itself. The logic I prized so much, the risk analysis skills that made me a rich man turned against me. I started calculating probabilities and none of them were good. Scenario A. Robbery gone wrong. Oak Creek was wealthy. We had nice things. Someone broke in. Natalie surprised them. The gunshots, Mr. Henderson said gunshots. We did not own a gun. So the intruder brought one. That meant intent. That meant violence. Scenario B. A targeted attack. But who? We were boring people. I was an analyst. She was a piano teacher. We paid our taxes. We recycled. Who would want to hurt us? Then a darker thought crept in, cold and slithering. The safe. I saw her kneeling in front of the safe again, changing the code. 7294. Why did she change the code? She said it was for Leo. Was it? Or was she hiding something? Was she protecting something? Did she know this was coming? I shook my head violently, trying to dislodge the thought. How dare I? How dare I suspect her when she might be bleeding out on our living room rug? She was my wife. She was the mother of my child. Please, I whispered to the empty car. Please be okay. Just be okay. I promise I will be better. I will stop working late. I will take us on that vacation to Italy. Just be okay. The miles dragged on. The highway signs flashed by green blurs in the rain. Exit 42. Exit 43. Almost there. My hands were cramping. I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. My chest hurt. I could feel my pulse thumping in my throat, a rapid, erratic rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. It felt like my heart was trying to escape my body. I took the exit for Oak Creek too fast. The back end of the car slid out fishtailing across the slick asphalt. I spun the wheel, correcting the slide, the tires finding grip at the last second. I didn't touch the brakes. I accelerated into the quiet, tree-lined streets of my neighborhood. Usually, at this time of night, Oak Creek was a tomb. Dark windows, silent driveways, sleeping families. But as I turned onto Elm Street, I saw the glow. It was not the warm, yellow glow of porch lights. It was a harsh, pulsating rhythm of blue and red. It cut through the rain, reflecting off the wet pavement, bouncing off the siding of the houses, turning the puddles into pools of neon blood. There were so many of them. 3 police cruisers, an ambulance, a fire truck. Their lights were blinding, creating a chaotic strobe effect that made the whole scene look like a nightmare disco. Neighbors were out on their porches, standing in bathrobes and holding umbrellas, watching. They were watching my house. I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a halt right in the middle of the street, the tires screaming in protest. I threw the gear into park and killed the engine. For a second, I just sat there. The silence inside the car was deafening after the roar of the drive. I looked through the rain-streaked windshield. My front door was wide open. The big bay window in the living room, the one Natalie loved because it let in the morning light for her plants, was shattered. Jagged teeth of glass stuck up from the frame. The curtains were blowing wildly and the wind flapping like surrender flags. But it was the garage that made my breath stop. Stretched across the wide white door of the garage, flapping wet and heavy in the wind, was a line of yellow tape. Crime scene, do not cross. It was a barrier, a physical line drawn between the life I had left 5 hours ago and the reality waiting for me now. I saw a figure move past the window inside the house, a flash of a uniform, a flashlight beam cutting through the dark of my living room. I fumbled for the door handle. My fingers were numb. I shoved the door open and stumbled out into the rain. The water soaked me instantly, plastering my shirt to my skin, but I didn't feel it. I ran. I ran toward the lights. I ran toward the shattered glass. I ran toward the yellow tape that marked the end of my world. I did not stop at the yellow tape. I hit it with the full momentum of a man whose life was collapsing my chest, colliding with the plastic barrier stretching it, until it snapped back against my shirt. I was screaming her name. I do not remember hearing my own voice, but I felt the raw scrape of it in my throat. I was just a physical force moving toward the open door of my home. Then a wall of navy blue blocked my path. It was Officer Jim Miller. We played poker together on the first Friday of every month. I knew about his daughter's braces and his bad knee. But tonight, he was not Jim. He was the law. He caught me by the shoulders, his grip like iron, stopping me dead in my tracks. "James! Stop!" he shouted, his voice booming over the sound of the rain and the idling diesel engines of the fire trucks. "You cannot go in there! It is an active crime scene!" I grappled with him, my shoes slipping on the wet asphalt of my own driveway. "Get off me, Jim! Where is she? Where is my wife?" "She is safe, James! She is safe!" He shook me hard, trying to snap me out of the hysteria. "She is over there by the ambulance. You need to calm down." I stopped fighting. The adrenaline that had fueled my 2-hour drive from Chicago suddenly drained away, leaving me trembling and cold. I looked past Miller's shoulder. The ambulance was parked near the curb, its back doors wide open, spilling harsh white light onto the wet street. Sitting on the edge of the bumper, wrapped in a bright orange thermal blanket, was Natalie. She looked tiny. That was my first thought. She looked like a child lost in a coat that was too big for her. Her hair was matted with rain, and sweat plastered to her forehead. But she was sitting upright. She was moving. Before I could move toward her, a hand touched my elbow. It was a firm, guiding grip distinct from Miller's restraint. I turned to see a man in a long gray raincoat that was dark with water across the shoulders. He had the tired, sharp eyes of someone who had seen too many nights like this. "Mr. Garcia?" he asked. His voice was calm, almost monotone. It was the voice of a man who dealt in facts, not tragedies. "I am Detective Rodriguez. I am the lead on this case. I need you to step over here with me for a moment." "I need to see my wife," I said, my voice shaking. "You will," Rodriguez said, steering me toward the dry shelter of the garage overhang, just outside the tape. "But first, I need you to understand what you are walking into. We need to preserve the integrity of the scene." I looked at him, wiping the rain from my eyes. "Scene? What happened?" Henderson said there were shots. He said Rodriguez pulled a small notepad from his pocket, though he did not look at it. He looked directly at me, studying my pupils, gauging my shock. "Someone broke into your home at approximately 11:30. Your wife was alone. There was an altercation." He paused, letting the words settle. "Your wife shot him, Mr. Garcia." The world tilted on its axis. I stared at Rodriguez, certain that I had misheard him. The sentence made no sense. It was a syntax error in the code of my reality. "She what?" I whispered. "She shot the intruder," Rodriguez repeated, his tone flat. "2 shots to the chest. He is dead. He is currently lying in your foyer." "That is impossible," I said immediately. The risk analyst in me took over, rejecting the data because it did not fit the model. "We do not have a gun. I hate guns. We have never owned a gun." Rodriguez raised an eyebrow, a flicker of professional curiosity. "You do not own a firearm? Are you certain?" 100%, I said. "I have a security system. I have motion sensors. I do not have a gun." "Your wife stated she used a vintage Colt," Rodriguez said. "She said it belonged to your father. She said it was stored in the attic." The memory hit me like a physical blow. The attic. Yes, there was a gun. A Colt Navy revolver, a relic from the 1900s that my father had left me in his will. It was a rusted, heavy piece of iron that I had shoved into a cardboard box labeled miscellaneous 6 years ago. It was buried behind the Christmas tree ornaments and Leo's old baby clothes. It was not a weapon. It was a paperweight. I did not even know if it worked. I did not think we had ammunition for it. That thing, I stammered. That is an antique. It has been in a taped box for years. How did she even get to it? She said she ran, Rodriguez said, watching my face closely. She heard the glass break downstairs. She ran to the attic, retrieved the weapon, loaded it, and came back down to the landing just as the intruder was coming up the stairs. I looked past Rodriguez at the house. My house. The front door was open, and inside, I could see the flash of cameras. Pop, 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 documenting the death in my hallway. The narrative Rodriguez was feeding me felt wrong. It felt jagged. Natalie was a piano teacher. Her hands were insured for their dexterity, on a keyboard, not a trigger. She screamed when she saw a spider. The idea of her sprinting to a dark attic, finding a specific box, unearthing a century-old revolver, finding bullets. Where were the bullets? Loading it and shooting a moving target twice in the chest. It was physically possible, perhaps, but statistically, it was an anomaly so massive it broke the chart. Can I see her now? I asked. I needed to look at her. I needed to see if the woman in the ambulance was the same woman I kissed goodbye this morning. Rodriguez nodded. Go ahead, but do not touch her hands. We still need to swab for residue. I walked toward the ambulance. My legs felt heavy, like I was walking through deep water. Natalie looked up as I approached. Her face was pale, drained of all blood, making her eyes look enormous and dark. There was a smear of blood, bright arterial red, on her right cheek, stark against her skin. It looked like war paint. James, she choked out. I collapsed onto my knees on the wet pavement in front of her. I wrapped my arms around her waist, burying my face in the thermal blanket. She smelled of rain, old metallic fear, and the sharp chemical scent of gunpowder. I am here, I said, my voice muffled by the blanket. I am here, Nat. You are okay. You are safe. She began to shake. It was a violent, full-body tremor that vibrated against my chest. She leaned forward, resting her chin on my shoulder, her tears hot against my neck. He was going to kill me, James, she whispered. Her voice was a broken rasp. He had a knife, a huge knife. He was coming up the stairs. I pulled back slightly to look at her face. I needed to read her. I needed to find the truth in her eyes. You got the gun? Dad's gun? She nodded frantically, her eyes darting around as if the intruder were still there. I did not know what else to do. I remembered you put it in the blue box. I just ran. I was so scared. I just wanted to protect the house. I wanted to protect us. Shh. I soothed her, wiping a tear from her cheek with my thumb, careful to avoid the blood smear. You did it. You survived. That is all that matters. He knew my name, she said. The words were soft, barely audible, over the radio chatter of the EMTs behind her. I froze. What? She gripped my biceps, her fingers digging into my skin with surprising strength. Her eyes locked onto mine, wide and terrified. Before I shot him, he looked at me. He smiled, James. He smiled. And he said, "Hello, Natalie." A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the rain. A random burglar does not know the name of the homeowner. A random burglar does not smile when he is staring down the barrel of a gun. Are you sure? I asked. I will never forget it, she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. He knew me. At that moment, the sound of a gurney rattling over the pavement drew my attention. Coming through! Make a hole! A paramedic shouted. I turned my head. 2 EMTs and a police officer were wheeling a stretcher out of my front door. On it lay a black body bag zipped shut. The form underneath was large, bulky. This was not a desperate teenager looking for jewelry. This was a man of significant mass. As they maneuvered the gurney off the porch and onto the driveway, one of the wheels caught on a crack in the concrete. The jolt caused the heavy black vinyl of the bag to slip. The zipper was not fully secured at the top, or perhaps the force of the drop jarred it open. An arm flopped out. It hung limp off the side of the stretcher, swinging slightly with the momentum. It was a thick, muscular arm, pale against the black asphalt. The hand was massive, the knuckles bruised and scarred. He was wearing a black tactical shirt, the sleeve rolled up to the elbow. I stared at it. I could not look away. This was the man who had tried to kill my wife. This was the variable that had invaded my equation. And then I saw it. On the inside of the wrist, right where the veins branch out in blue tributaries, was a tattoo. It was black ink, faded slightly, as if it had been done years ago. It was a barcode. A standard retail barcode like you would find on a box of cereal. But there was a thick red line tattooed diagonally across it, striking it out. A null symbol. I am a risk analyst. I notice details. I notice patterns. I notice when things do not belong. A random meth addict from Illinois does not have a crossed-out barcode tattooed on his wrist. That is not gang tagging. That is not a biker symbol. That is specific. That is military or paramilitary or something institutional. It looked like a label that had been voided. "Cover that up!" Rodriguez barked, stepping into my line of sight. The paramedic quickly shoved the arm back into the bag and zipped it up with a harsh zip sound. I looked up at Rodriguez. He was watching me. He saw that I had seen it. "Who is he?" I asked, standing up. My legs felt steadier now. The fear was mutating into something else. Suspicion. "John Doe for now," Rodriguez said, his face impassive. "No ID on the body. We will run his prints." "He was big," I said, my mind racing. "He was dressed in black. That did not look like a robbery detective." "We are investigating all angles, Mr. Garcia," Rodriguez said, his tone dismissing me. "Right now, you need to focus on your wife. She has been through a traumatic event. We will need a formal statement from both of you tomorrow, but for tonight, take her to your parents' house. Get her out of here." I looked back at Natalie. She was staring at the closed body bag. Her expression was unreadable. The fear was gone for a split second, replaced by a look of cold, hard assessment. But then, as soon as she saw me looking, the mask crumbled, and she was the weeping, terrified piano teacher again. "James," she whimpered, reaching out for me. I went to her. I held her. But my mind was still on the driveway, staring at the ghost of that arm. "Hello, Natalie. 7294, the barcode." The pieces were scattered on the floor of my mind, and none of them fit together to form the picture of a simple home invasion. I helped Natalie stand up. She leaned heavily against me, feigning, or perhaps experiencing, exhaustion. As I walked her toward my car, leaving the flashing lights and the yellow tape behind, I looked back at my house one last time. The front door was a black maw. The broken window was a jagged wound. It did not look like my home anymore. It looked like a stage set where a violent play had just concluded. And as I opened the car door for my wife, I realized that I did not know the woman I was buckling in. I knew the Natalie who baked cookies and played Chopin. I did not know the Natalie who could sprint to an attic load, a jamming antique revolver, and put 2 bullets into the center mass of a man twice her size in the dark. I got into the driver's seat. My hands were sticky. I looked down. It was Natalie's blood from where I had touched her cheek. I rubbed my thumb against the steering wheel, smearing the red stain. I started the car. The engine purred to life, a sound of normalcy that felt obscene. "Let's go," I said quietly. Natalie nodded, closing her eyes. "Take me away from here, James." I put the car in gear and drove away from the crime scene. But I knew with the cold certainty of a man who lived by the numbers that I was not driving away from the danger. I was driving right into the center of it. And the most dangerous thing in the world was sitting in the passenger seat, breathing softly, with the blood of a stranger drying on her face. The official police report called it a textbook case of justifiable homicide under the Castle Doctrine. Textbook. I have read a lot of textbooks in my life. I deal with regulations, compliance standards, and actuarial tables. One thing I know for certain is that real life rarely follows the text so neatly. Real life is messy. It is full of outliers and variables that do not fit the curve. But this was too clean. It was a straight line drawn through a chaotic scatterplot. The police released Natalie, pending further investigation, which was essentially a formality. To them, she was a hero. She was the brave mother defending her nest while her husband was away. Detective Rodriguez had been thorough, but he was also sympathetic. He saw a weeping music teacher and a dead intruder with a criminal record. The narrative wrote itself. We retreated to my parents' house in a quiet, leafy cul-de-sac, about 20 minutes from Oak Creek. My mother Maria immediately went into crisis management mode, which for her meant cooking enough lasagna to feed an infantry battalion and speaking in hushed, reverent tones. My father Robert, a retired engineer, just patted my back awkwardly every time I walked into a room and offered me scotch. Natalie spent the first 24 hours in the guest bedroom, buried under a mountain of quilts. She claimed she could not stop shivering. When I went in to check on her, she would cling to my hand, her eyes wide and watery, looking at me as if I were the only solid thing in a dissolving world. "I just wanted him to stop," she would whisper over and over again. "I just wanted him to go away." I played the role of the supportive husband. I held her hand. I brushed the hair from her forehead. I told her she was brave. I told her it was not her fault. But when I left that room and closed the door, the mask dropped. I am a risk analyst. My brain does not accept it is what it is. My brain demands to know why it is. When I look at a financial report, I do not look at the big, bold profit numbers at the bottom. I look for the anomalies in the expense columns. I look for the discrepancy that suggests embezzlement or fraud. And the narrative of that night was full of discrepancies. I sat on my parents' back porch, staring at their perfectly manicured rose bushes. It was late afternoon on Friday. The storm had passed, leaving the sky a brilliant, innocent blue. I had a tumbler of scotch in my hand, but I was not drinking it. I was thinking about the gun, the Colt Navy revolver. My father had given it to me 10 years ago. It was a legacy piece, a heavy, clunky thing from the mid-19th century. It was not a modern semi-automatic. It did not have a safety switch you could just flick off. It did not have a magazine you could just slap in. I closed my eyes and visualized the weapon. It was single action. That meant you had to manually pull the heavy hammer back with your thumb before every single shot. Click-clack. It required significant force. Then there was the ammunition. That gun did not take standard 9mm rounds you could buy at Walmart. It took specific vintage-style cartridges that were incredibly hard to find. I remembered buying a box of them maybe 7 years ago at a gun show just for the novelty of it. I had fired the gun exactly once. The recoil was distinct, a sharp, heavy kick that traveled straight up your arm. I looked at my own hands. They were steady. Then I thought of Natalie's hands. Natalie had the hands of a classical pianist. Long, slender fingers. Wrists that looked like they might snap if she lifted anything heavier than a grocery bag. She had never fired a gun in her life. She refused to even watch action movies with me because the loud noises made her jump. So let us look at the variables. Variable 1. A woman who is terrified of loud noises and violence. Variable 2. A pitch-black house in the middle of a storm. Variable 3. A heavy, antique weapon buried in a taped-up box in an attic full of junk. Variable 4. A moving target. A large, aggressive man. The probability of her finding the box in the dark? Low. The probability of her finding the separate small box of ammunition amidst the clutter? Extremely low. The probability of her successfully loading the cylinder, which requires fine motor skills, while in a state of panic? Statistically negligible. The probability of her cocking that heavy hammer, aiming and firing 2 shots into the center of the intruder's chest without missing? 0. It was 0. I do not care about adrenaline. I do not care about maternal instinct. You do not become John Wick just because you are scared. You do not develop tactical proficiency with a 19th century firearm in 30 seconds. I took a sip of the scotch. It burned going down. If she did not fumble with the gun, it meant she knew exactly where it was. It meant she knew how to load it. It meant she had practiced. My wife, the piano teacher, had practiced shooting. I set the glass down on the patio table. The suspicion was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I needed more data. I needed to check the digital footprint of the house. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I had installed a smart home security system 2 years ago. It was a high-end setup, sensors on every window, and door motion detectors in the hallways and cameras covering the perimeter. It was all controlled by a central hub that logged every single event down to the second. I opened the app. My thumb hovered over the logs icon. I felt like I was about to open a door I could never close again. I tapped the screen. A list of timestamps scrolled down in glowing white text against a black background. Thursday, January 22nd, 11:45 p.m. Panic alarm triggered. Neighbor report, external. 11:30 p.m. Glass break sensor. Living room window, triggered. 11:30 p.m. Motion detected. Living room. Okay, that matched the story. The intruder broke the window at 11:30. But I scrolled back. I needed to see what happened before 11:30. 11:25 p.m. System disarmed. Master code. I stared at the line of text. The system was disarmed at 11:25, 5 minutes before the glass broke. Why? If you are home alone at night in a storm with your husband away, you keep the alarm armed. You set it to stay mode. You do not turn it off. And it was not just disarmed. It was disarmed using the master code, 7294, the new code she had forced me to memorize. I kept scrolling, my heart rate picking up speed. 11:26 p.m. Backdoor sensor, opened. 11:27 p.m. Backdoor sensor, closed. I froze. The back door. The intruder had come in through the front window. That was where the glass was broken. That was where the body was found. So who opened the back door 4 minutes before he broke in? Did she let him in? No, that didn't make sense. If she let him in, why break the window? Why stage the violence? Unless the window breaking was the signal. Unless the window breaking was the start of the performance. But the back door opened and closed. Someone went out? Or someone came in quietly before the loud entrance? I needed to ask her. I needed to see her face when I asked her. I walked back into the house. The air conditioning felt too cold. I could hear the murmur of the television from the living room, where my father was watching the news. I went upstairs to the guest room. I knocked softly and pushed the door open. Natalie was sitting up in bed reading a book, or pretending to read. She closed it quickly when I entered. "Hey," she said softly. She looked fragile. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "Where have you been?" "Just getting some air," I said. I sat down on the edge of the bed. I did not take her hand this time. I clasped my own hands together between my knees to stop them from shaking. "Nat," I said, keeping my voice low and gentle. "I was just looking at the insurance claim for the window. I need to fill out some forms for the security company." She stiffened slightly, just a fraction of an inch. "Oh, okay. Can it wait?" "Yeah, it can wait," I said. "But I noticed something weird on the logs. The alarm system." She blinked. "The alarm?" "Yeah. It says the system was disarmed at 11:25, about 5 minutes before he broke in. Do you remember turning it off?" She did not look away. She did not flinch. She looked right at me with those big, innocent eyes. "Oh," she said, her voice wavering just enough to sound confused. "Yes. Yes, I did. I forgot about that." "Why did you turn it off?" I asked. "It was storming. It was late." "I took the trash out," she said. The lie came out smooth, polished, and immediate. "The trash?" I repeated. "Yes," she said, nodding. She was gaining confidence in the lie now. I realized I had forgotten to put the recycling bin out for the Friday morning pickup. I disarmed the system, ran out the back door to drag the bin to the curb, and ran back inside because of the rain. I must have forgotten to arm it again when I came back in. And then a few minutes later I heard the glass. She shuddered effectively. If I had not gone out, maybe the alarm would have scared him off when he touched the window. It is my fault, isn't it? She started to cry again. It was a good performance. It covered the data points, disarmed system, back door opening and closing. The timing fit. Except for one thing. I stood up. It is not your fault, Nat. Do not think that. Rest now. I walked out of the room and closed the door. My hands were cold. I walked down the hallway to the bathroom and locked the door. I turned on the faucet so the sound of running water would cover any noise I made. I pulled out my phone again. I took the trash out, she had said. I dragged the bin to the curb. I opened the security app again. I did not look at the logs this time. I went to the cameras tab. We have a camera over the garage that faces the driveway. It records on motion, but it also takes a snapshot every minute. I scrolled back to the night of the 22nd, 11:24 p.m. The driveway is empty. Rain is pouring down. The recycling bin is sitting by the side of the house where we always keep it. 11:25 p.m. The driveway is empty. 11:26 p.m. The driveway is empty. 11:27 p.m. The driveway is empty. I scrolled through every minute from 11:20 to 11:40. The recycling bin never moved. No figure in a raincoat ran out. No one dragged a blue plastic bin to the curb. The bin was still by the side of the house in the footage from this morning when the police arrived. She never took the trash out. She lied. Why would you lie about taking out the trash in the middle of a homicide investigation? You only lie if the truth is incriminating. So, if she did not go out to take out the trash, why did she disarm the alarm? Why did she open the back door? The deduction hit me with the force of a physical blow. She opened the back door to let someone in. Or she opened the back door to let something out. But the intruder broke in through the front. Unless the man who died in the hallway was not the only person in the house that night. Or, and this thought was even more terrifying, she opened the back door to signal that the house was ready. I looked at my face in the bathroom mirror. I looked pale. I looked like a man who had just realized he was sleeping with a stranger. The gun was impossible. The alarm was a lie. The trash was a fabrication. This was not a break-in. This was an operation. And my wife, the gentle piano teacher who cried over sad movies, was the field commander. I turned off the faucet. The silence in the bathroom was absolute. I had to be careful. If she could put 2 bullets in a man's chest and then lie to my face without blinking, she was dangerous. I was not dealing with Natalie anymore. I was dealing with whoever Natalie really was. I needed to go deeper. I needed to verify the fingerprint. I needed to know who the dead man really was. I unlocked the bathroom door and stepped out. I walked past the guest room where my wife was sleeping. I moved quietly, placing my feet carefully on the floorboards to avoid the creaks. I was not the husband anymore. I was the auditor. And I had just found the first thread of a massive fraud. Now I had to pull it, even if it meant the whole house came crashing down on top of me. The house was quiet, wrapped in the suffocating silence that only exists in the suburbs at 3 a.m. My parents were asleep downstairs, their rhythmic snoring drifting up through the floorboards. In the guest room, Natalie was sleeping the heavy chemical sleep of the sedated. The doctor had given her a strong dose of Valium to help her cope with the trauma. But as I stood in the hallway clutching a Ziploc bag, I knew the trauma was not what she was escaping. She was escaping scrutiny. Inside the plastic bag was a simple glass of water. Natalie had taken a sip from it just before the medication pulled her under. I had waited until her breathing leveled out, until the rise and fall of her chest became mechanical, before I crept to the bedside table. I picked up the glass by the rim, using the edge of my sleeve, careful not to smudge the surface. Her fingerprints were all over it. Whirls and ridges of oil and sweat that belonged to the woman I had married, or perhaps the woman who had replaced her. I sealed the bag. It was a tangible piece of betrayal. A husband does not collect biometric data on his wife unless the marriage is already a corpse. I took the glass to the bathroom, wrapped it in a towel, and hid it deep inside my shaving kit. I needed to verify who she was. The woman sleeping in that bed had the face of Natalie Garcia, but the data, the gun, the alarm, the lie about the trash, suggested an imposter. But before I could identify her, I needed to identify the man she had killed. I went downstairs to my father's study. It was a room smelling of pipe tobacco and old paper, a sanctuary of the past. I closed the door and turned on the desk lamp, keeping the light low. I pulled out my laptop and logged into a secure messaging app. I needed a favor. During my 15 years in risk analysis, I had built a network of contacts that operated in the gray areas of the industry. Insurance fraud investigators, private detectives, data brokers. People who could find the things that people wanted hidden. I had a friend, let us call him Carl, who worked as a fraud adjuster for a massive underwriting firm in Las Vegas. Carl specialized in high-risk assets, which was corporate speak for dealing with criminals, organized crime, and dead bodies that turned up in inconvenient places. I typed out a message. Need an ID on a tattoo. Barcode with a red strike through. Male, Caucasian, heavy build, deceased, urgent. I attached a rough sketch I had drawn from memory. The image of that arm, flopping out of the body bag, was burned into my retinas. The black ink against the pale skin. The red slash. I waited. The cursor blinked a rhythmic taunt. 1 minute. 2 minutes. My phone buzzed. It was a voice call through the app. Carl. James. His voice was gravelly, the sound of a man who had seen too much and slept too little. You are asking about some heavy stuff for a Tuesday night. Or Wednesday morning. Whatever it is. Do you know the mark? I asked, skipping the pleasantries. I know it, Carl said. And if you are seeing it, you are in trouble. That is a unit marker. It belongs to a private security firm that went belly up about 5 years ago. Black River Solutions. They were basically mercenaries. They did debt collection, high-value asset retrieval, intimidation. Nasty work. Who is the guy? I pressed. I ran the description against the old employee database. We have it on file because they tried to scam us on a liability claim years back. Big guy, 6'4", scar above the left eye. I did not see the face, I admitted. But he was huge, massive hands. That sounds like Victor Vance, Carl said. He was one of their top enforcers. A real piece of work, specialized in aggressive negotiations. But here is the thing, James. Victor Vance operates out of Nevada. He is a Vegas guy. He does not leave the desert unless the payout is massive. What is he doing in Illinois? I felt a cold drop of sweat slide down my spine. He is dead, Carl. Someone shot him in my house. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Your house? Carl asked, his voice dropping an octave. James, listen to me very carefully. Victor Vance does not break into houses to steal televisions. If Victor Vance was in your house, he was sent there. Or he was looking for someone specific. He is a hunter, not a burglar. If he is dead, whoever killed him knew exactly what they were doing. My wife shot him, I said. The words tasted like ash. Your wife? Carl let out a short, disbelief-filled breath. The piano teacher. James, you need to get out of there. Piano teachers do not drop guys like Victor Vance. That is a professional hit. You are standing on a landmine. I thanked him and hung up. Victor Vance, a debt collector from 2,000 miles away, a mercenary. The narrative of the random break-in had just completely collapsed. A thug from Las Vegas does not accidentally stumble upon a house in a quiet Chicago suburb during a rainstorm. He had a destination. He had a target. He was coming for her. I sat in the dark study, the laptop screen casting a ghostly blue glow on my face. Why would a Vegas enforcer be looking for Natalie? She was from Wisconsin. She had gone to State University. We had met at a coffee shop. Her life was a straight line of normalcy. Unless that line was a fabrication. I closed the laptop. I needed to know more, and the only place the answers could be was in the room where she was sleeping. I went back upstairs. The house felt different now. It was no longer a sanctuary. It was a cage. Every shadow looked like a threat. I pushed the door to the guest room open inch by inch. The hinges groaned softly, and I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. Natalie did not move. Her breathing remained deep and even. The Valium was doing its job. I slipped inside, closing the door behind me. The room was illuminated only by a sliver of moonlight coming through the curtains. I moved toward the chair where she had piled her clothes. I went through her jeans pockets. Nothing. I checked her purse. A wallet with $60 in cash, a library card, a pack of gum lip balm. It was the purse of a suburban mother. It was perfectly curated. Too curated. I looked around the room. Where would you hide something if you were in a strange house? You would not put it in the drawer. That is the first place people look. You would not put it under the mattress. That is a cliché. You would hide it in plain sight, somewhere temporary. My eyes scanned the room, the dresser, the closet, the nightstand. Then I saw it. In the corner of the room, my mother kept a large leafy fern in a ceramic pot. It was a heavy, decorative thing. The soil around the base of the plant looked disturbed. There were a few dark crumbs of dirt on the beige carpet, tiny specks that a normal person would miss, but a risk analyst sees as a deviation. Why would there be dirt on the carpet? The plant had not been moved. I walked over to the fern. I knelt down. My fingers brushed the surface of the soil. It was loose. I dug my fingers in. About an inch down, I felt something hard and smooth. Plastic. I pulled it out. It was a phone. Not her iPhone with the pink case. This was a cheap black burner phone. A throwaway device you buy at a gas station with cash. My hands were trembling as I wiped the dirt off the screen. I pressed the power button. Please let it be charged. Please let it be on. The screen lit up. The battery icon showed 12%. There was no passcode. Of course not. If you get caught, you want to be able to wipe it fast, or maybe she just didn't expect anyone to ever find it. I opened the message history. There was only one conversation thread. No names. Just a number. I scrolled to the bottom to the messages from yesterday. The timestamps told a story that made my blood run cold. 9:30 p.m., sent by Natalie. He found me. He is outside. I need more money. You said I was safe here. My breath caught in my throat. 9:30. That was when I was calling her from the hotel. That was when the line was busy. She wasn't talking on the landline. She was using the landline to jam the signal, or maybe she had taken it off the hook so she wouldn't be interrupted while she dealt with this. 9:32 p.m. Received. You spent the reserve. There is no more money. You are on your own. 9:35 p.m. Sent by Natalie. If he takes me in, I talk. I tell them everything. About the accounts. About the wash. Blackmail. She was threatening someone. My sweet, gentle wife was threatening a partner. 9:40 p.m. Received. Handle it. Or I will handle you. Do not let him leave that house. I stared at the screen. The glowing letters blurred before my eyes. Handle it. That was the order. It was not a robbery. It was not self-defense. It was a sanctioned hit. Victor Vance had come to collect a debt or drag her back to whatever hell she had crawled out of, and she had reached out to her handler for help. When help was refused, she was given an ultimatum: kill him, or we kill you. The break-in was theater. She had let him in. Maybe she told him she had the money inside. She lured him in, disarmed the alarm, opened the back door to make it look like an entry point. And then, when his guard was down, she retrieved the gun she had already prepped and executed him. And she used me. She used my trip to Chicago as the window of opportunity. She used my father's gun to keep her own hands clean of purchasing a weapon. She used my house as the slaughterhouse. I felt a wave of nausea so strong, I had to swallow hard to keep from retching. The woman I had shared a bed with for 10 years, the mother of my child, was a cold-blooded killer. I took a screenshot of the texts with my own phone, my hands shaking so badly the images were almost blurry. I needed evidence. I needed to send this to Rodriguez. I was just about to put the burner phone back in her purse. No, I should keep it. I should take it to the police. I stood up, clutching the dirty black phone in my hand. I turned around, intending to leave the room and drive straight to the station. And I stopped. The air in the room had changed. The rhythm of the breathing from the bed had stopped. I looked at the bed. Natalie was sitting up. She was not groggy. She was not sleepy. The drug-induced haze that had been there earlier was gone, wiped away by a terrifying clarity. Her hair was messy, falling over her face, but her eyes were visible through the strands. They were not the eyes of Natalie Garcia. They were hard, flat, and completely devoid of warmth. They were the eyes of a shark sensing blood in the water. She was looking at the phone in my hand. Then, she looked up at my face. She did not scream. She did not ask what I was doing. She did not cry. She slowly swung her legs over the side of the bed and stood up. Her movements were fluid, precise, and predatory. She stood between me and the door. "James," she said. Her voice was different. The soft musical lilt was gone. It was lower, steadier. It was the voice of someone who gave orders, not someone who taught scales. "You should not have looked in the plant," she said. "That was rude." She took a step toward me. I instinctively stepped back, hitting the dresser. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice failing me. She tilted her head to the side, a bird of prey examining a mouse. A small, chilling smile played on her lips. The same smile she had given me when I drove away, the smile of the actress dropping the character. "I am the woman who has kept you safe for 10 years, she said. "But you are making it very difficult for me to keep doing that, James. Give me the phone." She held out her hand. It was steady. It was a command. I looked at the phone, then at her. The distance between us was only 5 feet, but it felt like a canyon. I realized with a jolt of terror that I was alone in a room with a woman who had just killed a professional enforcer without blinking. And now she knew that I knew. "Did you kill him?" I asked, clutching the phone tighter. "Was it an execution?" Her eyes narrowed. "It was necessary, just like this conversation is becoming necessary. Now give me the phone, James. Before you make a mistake you cannot calculate your way out of." She took another step. I was the risk analyst. I spent my life predicting bad outcomes. But as I looked into the eyes of the stranger, wearing my wife's face, I realized I had not predicted this. I had not factored in that the biggest threat to my life was not the intruder who broke in, but the person who was already inside. She did not lunge at me. She did not scream. She did not try to snatch the phone from my hand. Instead, Natalie did something far more terrifying. She sat down on the edge of the bed, smoothed out the wrinkles in her pajama pants, and patted the mattress beside her. It was the gesture of a mother inviting a child to sit for a bedtime story, but the air in the room was cold enough to freeze breath. "Sit down, James," she said. Her voice was steady, stripped of the trembling vibrato she had used with the police. "If we are going to do this, we are going to do it like adults. You found the phone. You saw the messages. I suppose the act is over." I did not sit. I stayed by the door, my hand gripping the doorknob, ready to run. "Who is he?" I asked again. "Who was Victor Vance?" Natalie sighed a long, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of a lifetime. She looked down at her hands, those delicate pianist hands that I now knew could strip and fire a revolver in the dark. "He was a mistake," she said softly. "A mistake from a life I lived before I met you, before I became Mrs. Garcia, before I became a mother." She looked up at me, and her eyes were wet. Not the frantic tears of the night before, but a slow, welling sadness that looked devastatingly real. This was the trick truth. In my line of work, we call it anchoring. You give the auditor a piece of the truth, a small, shameful admission, to anchor their belief so they stop looking for the bigger lie hidden behind it. When I was 22, she began, her voice low. My mother got sick. You know she died before we met, but you do not know how bad it was. The insurance denied her claim. The treatment cost thousands of dollars a week. I was a student. I was desperate. I went to people I should not have gone to. Loan sharks. Bad men. She paused, wiping a tear from her cheek. Victor was the collector. I borrowed $20,000. By the time my mother died with interest, they said I owed $100,000. I couldn't pay. I ran. I changed my name. I moved to Illinois. I met you. I thought I was safe. She looked at me with a pleading intensity. He found me, James, 2 days ago. He sent me a photo of Leo at camp. He said if I did not pay him everything I had, he would take our son. That is why I emptied the savings. That is why I texted him. I was trying to buy him off. But he came to the house anyway. He was going to kill me. I had to stop him. It was a perfect story. It explained the money. It explained the text messages about handling it. It explained the fear. It explained why she had hidden it from me. Shame, fear of judgment, fear of endangering us. It tapped into my protective instincts. It made her a victim again, just a victim who fought back. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, allowing my voice to soften. I had to sell this. If she thought I believed her, I might survive the night. Because you are James Garcia, she said, offering a weak, trembling smile. You are the man of law and order. You are the risk analyst. How could I tell you that your wife was a fugitive from a loan shark? I was terrified you would leave me. I did it to protect our family. I stepped away from the door and walked over to her. I knelt in front of her, just as I had done in the driveway. I took her hands. They were cold. We will figure this out, I lied. We will get a lawyer. If it was self-defense against an extortionist, the police will understand. We can explain the text messages. She squeezed my hands. No police, James. Please. If we drag this out, his associates might come back. We just need to let the police rule it self-defense and move on. Promise me. No more digging. Let me bury this past. Okay, I said. Okay, Nat. No more digging. I hugged her. Over her shoulder, my eyes were wide open, staring at the wall. I did not believe a single word. The text message I had read did not say, "Please don't hurt my son." It said, "Handle it, or I will handle you." That is not how a debtor talks to a loan shark. That is how a partner talks to a subordinate. That is how a boss talks to an employee. She was not the victim. She was the management. The next morning, the household tried to return to a bizarre version of normalcy. Natalie stayed in bed playing the role of the traumatized survivor for my parents. I told them I had to go into the office to file some emergency paperwork and speak to the insurance adjusters about the house. As soon as I was in my car, I drove to a coffee shop 3 towns over. I sat in the back corner, my back to the wall, and opened my laptop. I connected to the public Wi-Fi through a VPN. I was done being the husband. I was the auditor now, and I was auditing the entity known as Natalie Garcia. First, the money. She had mentioned emptying the savings. I logged into our joint accounts. Indeed, the emergency fund was drained. $15,000 withdrawn in cash over 3 days from different ATMs. But $15,000 was not enough to make a guy like Victor Vance drive across the country. I thought about Leo. My father had set up a trust fund for Leo when he was born. It was an irrevocable trust, but as the parents, we were the trustees. It had $50,000 in it, meant for his college education. I logged into the trust portal. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I did not want to see it. I wanted to be wrong. I hit enter. Account balance, $0.00. The transaction date was Monday, 3 days ago. A wire transfer to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. I felt a physical sickness in my gut. She had stolen from our son. She had not just panicked and pulled cash for a ransom. She had wired $50,000 offshore. You do not wire ransom money to the Caymans. You wire retirement money to the Caymans. She was planning an exit. I took a screenshot of the transaction. Next, I needed to talk to Rodriguez. I could not tell him everything, not yet. If I told him my wife was a murderer, he would arrest her, and she would lawyer up, and maybe the truth would get buried. Or worse, her associates would get to me before I could prove anything. I needed him to pull the thread from his end. I called him from a burner app on my phone. "Detective Rodriguez," he answered on the second ring. "It is James Garcia," I said. "I am not calling to make a statement. I am calling to give you a tip." "Mr. Garcia," his tone was cautious. "What kind of tip?" "The man who died in my house, Victor Vance. I did some digging online. He has a history in Nevada. Check his financials, detective. Not his Wells Fargo account. Check for accounts linked to a company called Desert Shade Holdings. I think you will find he was paid a significant sum of money recently. And I think you will find the source of that money is interesting." "James, where are you getting this?" Rodriguez asked sharply. "You need to come in. Just check the accounts, detective. If I am wrong, I am just a paranoid husband. If I am right, this is not a burglary." I hung up. I did not have proof of Desert Shade Holdings, but it was a calculated bluff. If Rodriguez started digging into Vance's finances, he would find the connection to whoever Natalie really was. Now for the final piece of the puzzle. The identity. I had the fingerprint. I had the glass hidden in my shaving kit. But I needed a name to match it to. I dug into my digital archives. I keep everything. Every tax return, every receipt, every scanned document. I found the folder labeled Natalie Personal. Inside was a scan of her driver's license from when we first moved in together 10 years ago. It was a Wisconsin license. I zoomed in on the image. To the naked eye, it looked perfect, but I deal with document fraud. I know what to look for. I focused on the state motto at the top, America's Dairyland. I opened a reference image of a real Wisconsin license from the same year. I placed them side by side on the screen. The font on Natalie's license was off. It was subtle, a matter of pixels. The spacing between the R and the Y in Dairyland was 0.5 millimeters too wide. And the holographic overlay, which should have been faint, was too sharp in the scan. It was a forgery. A high-level professional forgery, likely worth $5,000 on the black market, but a forgery nonetheless. Natalie Garcia did not exist. So who was she? I reached into my bag and pulled out the Ziploc bag with the glass. I took a high-resolution photo of the fingerprints on the rim, using a macro lens attachment I used for inspecting property damage. I sent the image to a contact I had used once before, a private investigator in D.C., who had access to databases that regular civilians didn't even know existed. He wasn't cheap, but he was fast. Subject: priority identification, female. Late 30s. Check Interpol and federal databases. Do not ask why. I sat in that coffee shop for 4 hours. I drank 5 cups of black coffee. My hands were shaking, not from the caffeine, but from the adrenaline of the hunt. I watched the door. Every time a woman with brown hair walked in, my heart stopped. At 2:30 in the afternoon, my laptop pinged. One new secure message. I opened it. There was no text in the body of the email, just an attachment, a PDF file. I clicked it. The document loaded slowly, revealing a mugshot. The woman in the photo was younger. Her hair was blonde, cut short in a bob. She was wearing a gray prison jumpsuit. But the eyes were the same. Those large, intelligent, predatory eyes. Name: Elena Rostova. D.O.B. March 12, 1985. Nationality: Russian/American dual citizen. Status: deceased, presumed. Wanted for: wire fraud, Aggravated identity theft, money laundering, RICO Act. Notes. Subject is a high-level facilitator for the organization, suspected of laundering over $40 million through shell real estate companies in the Midwest. Disappeared following a car bomb in Chicago in 2015. Dental records were inconclusive, but DNA at the scene was a match. Case closed. I stared at the screen. The noise of the coffee shop faded away. The barista grinding beans, the indie music playing on the speakers, the chatter of students. It all became background static. My wife was not a girl from Wisconsin who borrowed money for her sick mother. She was Elena Rostova. She was a professional money launderer for the Russian mob. She was a ghost who had faked her own death 10 years ago to escape a RICO indictment and presumably her former employers. The puzzle pieces slammed together with a deafening clarity. The family revenge stories she helped me write, they weren't fiction. They were memories. The thriller plots, they were training manuals. The strict privacy? It wasn't shyness. It was survival. The sudden appearance of Victor Vance? He wasn't a loan shark. He was a cleaner. Someone from her past had found her. Maybe the mob, maybe the feds, maybe a rival. They sent Victor to tie up the loose end. And she, being Elena Rostova, the woman who had laundered $40 million and faked a car bombing, did not panic. She invited him in. She served him tea. She waited for the storm. And then she put 2 bullets in his chest and convinced the local police she was a terrified housewife. And I was the cover. I was the boring, predictable, safe accountant husband who gave her the perfect camouflage. For 10 years, I had been the beard for a monster. I closed the laptop. I felt cold, bone-deep cold. I had to go back. I had to go back to that house, to that bedroom, and lie next to her. I had to pretend I was still the fool. Because if Elena Rostova realized that James Garcia knew her name, I would not be the husband anymore. I would be the next loose end. I packed up my things. I walked out to my car. As I gripped the door handle, I realized my hand was shaking uncontrollable. I looked at my reflection in the car window. I looked the same. But inside, the risk analyst was screaming. The risk was no longer calculated. It was total. I got in the car. I drove back to my parents' house. I walked up the stairs. I opened the door to the guest room. Natalie, Elena, was sitting in the chair by the window watching the street. She turned when I entered. "Did you get the paperwork done, James?" she asked. Her voice was light casual. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it was cracking my face. "It is all filed. The insurance company is processing it." "Good," she said. She stood up and walked over to me. She placed a hand on my chest. "I am glad we are past this. I am glad I told you the truth." I looked into the eyes of a woman who had been dead for 10 years. "Me too," I said. "I am glad I know who you really are." It was a dangerous line, a slip, but I couldn't help it. She paused. Her hand went still on my chest. Her eyes searched mine, looking for the crack in the facade. For a second, the predator resurfaced. Then she smiled. "I love you, James." "I love you too, Natalie," I said. And as I hugged her, I felt the cold, hard reality of the gun she had hidden somewhere in this room. I didn't know where it was, but I knew it was there. And I knew that from this moment on, every word, every breath, every movement in this marriage was a move in a game of chess, where the loser ended up in a body bag. I was not just living with a killer. I was sleeping with the Grandmaster. The realization that my wife was a ghost named Elena Rostova changed the physics of my world. Gravity felt heavier. The air felt thinner. But the most dangerous shift was in the silence. Before, silence between us was comfortable. Now it was a tactical maneuver. Every time she looked at me, I knew she was calculating the probability of my loyalty. And every time I looked away, she knew I was lying. She knew. You cannot hide fear from a predator, and Elena, I had to stop calling her Natalie in my head, was an apex predator. She sensed my hesitation when I hugged her. She felt the rigidity in my spine when she touched my arm. My risk analyst facade was cracking, and she was already preparing the demolition charges to bring the whole structure down. The narrative of the loan shark Victor Vance had dissolved the moment I saw her mugshot. Victor was not coming to collect a $20,000 debt from a struggling student. He was coming for a cut of the $40 million she had laundered and stolen from the organization. He was an old associate, a ghost from the life she had supposedly burned in that car crash 10 years ago. He had tracked her down not to kill her, but to cash out. And she had killed him because Elena Rostova does not share. She eliminates. But now I was the loose end. I knew about the money. I knew about the text messages. And she knew that I knew. Her plan B started subtly, like a gas leak. You do not smell it until the room is already full. It began on Wednesday afternoon. We were still at my parents' house, but the police had released our home in Oak Creek. The crime scene cleanup crew had finished scrubbing the blood out of the hardwood in the foyer. Rodriguez had told us we could return to pick up essentials, though he advised us to stay with family for a few more days while the investigation wrapped up. I was sitting in the kitchen pretending to work on my laptop when I heard her on the phone in the living room. She was talking to Detective Rodriguez. Her voice was low, trembling, pitched perfectly, to sound like a woman on the edge of a nervous breakdown. "I just do not know, Detective," she was saying. "James has been different lately. Ever since he found out about my past debt, he has been so angry. He keeps asking if Victor and I had a relationship. He is so jealous. I am scared he thinks I invited Victor over for other reasons." I stopped typing. My blood ran cold. She was not just defending herself. She was pivoting. She was planting a seed in the detective's mind. James is jealous. James is angry. James thinks his wife was sleeping with the intruder. If she could convince the police that I was a volatile, jealous husband, then everything changed. If something happened to me, a suicide born of shame or an accident, it would fit the profile. Or worse, she was setting me up to take the fall for Victor. If she could spin it, that I hired Victor to kill her, or that I killed Victor in a rage I had to get out of the house. I needed air. "I am going to the car to get my charger," I called out, my voice sounding hollow. "Okay, honey," she called back. "Be safe." The sweetness in her voice made my skin crawl. I walked out to the driveway. My sedan was parked next to my father's truck. It was still raining lightly, a gray drizzle that matched the color of my mood. I unlocked the car and slid into the driver's seat. It smelled like her perfume. Lavender and vanilla. She must have been in here recently. I opened the glove box to grab my phone charger. It was a mess. Papers were shuffled. The manual was bent. I am a meticulous man. I keep my glove box organized. Someone had rummaged through it. I frowned. I checked the center console. The coins were scattered. The registration was sticking out. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. Why was she searching my car? Was she looking for the evidence I had found? The glass with the fingerprint was still in my shaving kit upstairs. The burner phone was in her possession. Then I looked under the passenger seat. I do not know why I looked. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the paranoia that had become my new operating system. I reached under the seat, my fingers brushing against the carpet. My hand hit something hard, cold, metal. I froze. Slowly, I pulled it out. It was a gun. Not the antique Colt Navy she had used to kill Victor. This was a snub-nose .38 Special. Small black, holding 5 rounds. The serial number on the side had been filed off, leaving a rough silver scar on the metal. I stared at it, the breath trapped in my lungs. She had planted it. She had put an illegal, untraceable firearm in my car. The realization hit me with the force of a sledgehammer. This was the second layer of the trap. If the police searched my car, perhaps based on an anonymous tip about an angry husband hoarding weapons, they would find this. A gun with the serial number filed off. It would look like I was planning something. Or worse, she would use this gun to kill me, wipe her prints, press my dead hand around it, and claim I attacked her in a jealous rage. And she had to use the Colt again. Husband snaps. Murder-suicide. Case closed. I wiped the gun down frantically with the hem of my shirt, terrified that my DNA was now on it. I shoved it back under the seat. I could not bring it into my parents' house. I could not throw it in the trash where they might find it. I had to leave it there for now, knowing it was a ticking time bomb sitting beneath the upholstery. I sat up, gripping the steering wheel. I was hyperventilating. She was not just leaving. She was destroying me. She was going to burn my life to the ground to cover her tracks, just like she had burned her own life 10 years ago. I needed to think. I needed to stop reacting and start acting. She was physically stronger than me. I had seen the way she handled Victor. She was better with weapons. She was a better liar. If I tried to confront her, if I tried to fight her physically, I would lose. I would end up dead, and she would have a perfect story to explain it. I needed leverage. I needed something undeniable. Something that not even her acting skills could explain away. I needed video. The text messages on the burner phone were good, but she had deleted them by now, and my screenshots could be dismissed as photoshopped. I needed to catch her in the act. I needed to record her making a move. I thought about the house in Oak Creek. She spent hours in the home office. That was her command center. If she was coordinating an escape or moving the rest of the money, she would do it there. I pulled out my phone and opened a shopping app. I searched for hidden camera. I found a local spy shop in downtown Chicago that offered same-day courier delivery. I ordered a button camera, tiny, inconspicuous, with a 12-hour battery life and motion activation. I paid extra for the rush courier to drop it at a coffee shop near my parents' house, not to the house itself. But there was something more important than the camera. Something more important than my life. Leo. My son was at the Eagle Eye Scout Camp 200 miles away. He was the only leverage she had left. If she sensed the walls closing in, she would grab him. She would take him with her. She would use him as a shield, or worse, she would raise him in the shadow of the organizatsia. I could not let that happen. I looked at the clock on the dashboard. It was 2:15 in the afternoon. The camp office closed at 5. I dialed the number for the camp. My hands were shaking so hard, I mistyped the first time. Eagle Eye Scout Camp, this is Sarah speaking, a cheerful voice answered. Sarah, this is James Garcia, Leo Garcia's father. Oh, hi, Mr. Garcia. Leo is doing great. He just earned his archery badge yesterday. That is great, Sarah, I said, forcing my voice to sound calm, authoritative. Listen, I need to update the pickup protocols for Leo, effectively immediately. Okay, she said, the smile leaving her voice as she sensed the tension. Go ahead. Leo is to remain at camp for the full extension of the session, another week. I have already wired the payment. Another week? But the session ends on Saturday. I know, but there is a family emergency, a medical situation. We cannot have him home right now. It is not safe. I took a breath. Here is the important part, Sarah. Under no circumstances is his mother, Natalie Garcia, allowed to pick him up. Silence on the line. Mr. Garcia, usually both parents are on the authorized list. Is there a custody order? Not yet, I lied. But there will be by Monday. Listen to me. My wife is having a mental health crisis. She is unstable. If she shows up, if she calls you, do not release him. You call me immediately. And if she tries to take him, you call the police. Do you understand? This is a red protocol situation. Red protocol was a term I made up, but it sounded official. It sounded scary. I understand, Sarah stammered. I will flag his file right now. No pickup by Mom, only you. And if I cannot come, I added, I will give you a code word. If the person does not have the code word, Leo goes nowhere. The word is calculus. Write it down. Calculus, she repeated. Got it. Thank you, Sarah. You might be saving his life. I hung up. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, followed instantly by a new wave of terror. I had just secured the asset, but I had also declared war. Once Natalie found out I had blocked her from Leo, the pretense would be over. I retrieved the camera from the courier an hour later, telling Natalie I was going for a drive to clear my head. When I got back to my parents' house, the atmosphere was suffocating. Natalie was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. The knife hit the cutting board with a rhythmic, sharp thwack, thwack, thwack. "Feeling better?" she asked without looking up. "A little," I said. "I think I will go over to the house tomorrow, just to check on the mail. Maybe do some work in the office." She paused. The knife stopped in midair. "I was thinking we should go on a trip," she said. She turned to face me. The knife was still in her hand. She was smiling, but her eyes were dead. "A trip?" I asked, leaning against the counter, keeping the island between us. "Yes," she said. "I think we all need to get away. The police said we are not suspects. We can leave. I was thinking we pick up Leo early on Saturday and just drive. Maybe go up to Canada, or fly to Mexico. Somewhere warm, somewhere safe." It was the escape plan. She was trying to flush us out. If we went to Mexico, James Garcia would disappear, and only Elena would come back. Or maybe neither of us would. "I cannot leave work, Nat," I said. "The quarterly audit is coming up, and Leo loves camp. We should let him finish." "Work," she laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "James, a man died in our hallway. Do you really think work matters right now?" "It matters to me," I said, my voice hardening. "It is how I pay for that house. It is how I pay for the life we have." She took a step toward me. "The life we have is over, James. We need to start a new one, a better one. I have resources. We do not need your job." She was offering me a deal. "Come with me. Be a fugitive. Live off the dirty money." "I am not going anywhere," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "And neither is Leo. I called the camp. He is staying an extra week." The silence that followed was absolute. The smile dropped from her face instantly. It was like watching a wax figure melt. The features hardened. The skin seemed to tighten. "You did what?" she whispered. "I extended his stay," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the trembling in my knees. "I think it is better if he is away from all this stress. Away from everything." She stared at me. For the first time, I saw genuine anger in her eyes. Not the fake frustration of a wife, but the cold, calculating rage of a strategist who has just had a piece removed from the board. "You should not have done that without asking me," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried across the room like a gunshot. "Leo needs his mother. Leo needs to be safe," I countered. "And right now, I don't think he is safe with you." The words hung in the air. I had said it. I had crossed the line. She tightened her grip on the knife. For a second, I thought she was going to throw it. I braced myself, my muscles tensing to dodge. But she didn't. She took a deep breath, and the mask slid back into place. It was a terrifying transformation to watch. The rage smoothed out into concern. The predator became the victim again. "You are right," she said, her voice cracking. "I am just not thinking clearly. I just miss him so much. I feel like I am losing my family, James." She set the knife down. "You are not losing us," I lied. "We just need time." "Okay," she said. "Okay. An extra week. We can do that." She turned back to the vegetables. Thwack, 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 but I knew. I knew that the okay was a lie. I had blocked her exit. I had taken her shield. Now she was cornered. And a cornered animal does not wait. It attacks. I had to get that camera installed. Tonight. "I am going to head over to the house for an hour," I said. "I need to get some files from the office server before I lose access." "Do you want me to come?" she asked, not turning around. "No," I said. "I will be quick." I walked out the door. I knew I had maybe 45 minutes before she grew suspicious and followed me or sent someone, if she had anyone left, to find me. I drove to the house in Oak Creek. The yellow tape was gone, but the stain on the driveway remained. I let myself in. The house smelled of bleach and copper. I went straight to the home office. It was a small room off the living room where she graded papers and planned lessons. I scanned the room. Where would she sit? The desk. I took the button camera out of my pocket. It was tiny, the size of a quarter. I stuck it inside the hollow spine of a binder on the bookshelf directly facing the desk. I angled it perfectly. It would capture anyone sitting in that chair and anyone typing on that computer. I turned it on. A tiny red light blinked once, then vanished. It was recording. I quickly connected it to the Wi-Fi. I set it to upload to a cloud server that only I had the password to. I was just about to leave when I saw something on her desk. It was a notepad. She had been doodling. Just random shapes, squares, triangles. But in the center of the page, she had written a list of numbers. Flight 492, MEX, Thursday 0600, Thursday, tomorrow, 6 in the morning. She wasn't planning to leave on Saturday. She was planning to leave tomorrow. And she was planning to take us, or just Leo, by force if necessary. I looked at my watch. It was 6:30 in the evening on Wednesday. I had less than 12 hours. I ran out of the house. I had to get back to my parents. I had to keep playing the game for one more night. I had to wait for the camera to catch her transferring the money or talking to her contacts. But as I drove back, the weight of the gun under my seat felt like it was burning a hole through the floor. I was driving back into the cage with the tiger. And tonight, I knew neither of us was going to sleep. In the world of forensic accounting, we have a term called a honeypot. It is a decoy system, a trap designed to look like a high-value target. An unguarded server, a folder of sensitive passwords, a loose thread in a tight ledger. You leave it out in the open, vulnerable and tempting, and then you wait to see who tries to break into it. You do not catch a thief by chasing them. You catch them by letting them think they have already won. I sat in the study of my parents' house, the door slightly ajar. I knew Natalie, no Elena, was in the kitchen. I could hear the faint clinking of dishes being put away. She was efficient. She was always cleaning up the mess, wiping away the evidence, whether it was dirty plates or a dead mercenary in our hallway. On the desk in front of me, I had arranged a masterpiece of fiction. It was a manila folder stuffed with printouts. To the untrained eye, they looked like complex banking schematics. They were actually useless metadata logs from an old server migration I had overseen 5 years ago, mixed with some random alphanumeric strings I had generated in Excel. But I had highlighted specific lines in neon yellow. I had scribbled notes in the margins like Cayman routing confirmed and Shell Company access key. And right on top I had placed a sticky note with a single heavy circle around a 9-digit number. It looked exactly like what a panic-stricken husband would find if he had stumbled upon his criminal wife's hidden fortune. I took a deep breath. My heart was doing that erratic flutter against my ribs again, the physical symptom of living in a cage with a tiger. I had to sell this. If my performance was off by even a fraction, I was dead. I picked up my phone. I did not dial anyone. I just held it to my ear and waited 4 seconds. "Yes, is this the FBI field office in Chicago?" I said. My voice was loud enough to carry down the hallway, but shaky enough to sound like a man pushed to his breaking point. I paused, listening to the silence on the line. "I need to speak to Agent Miller. It is urgent. My name is James Garcia. Tell him I found the ledger." I waited again. I could hear the sounds in the kitchen stop. The water was turned off. The clinking ceased. She was listening. "Yes, I will hold." I tapped my fingers on the desk, creating a rhythm of nervous energy. I looked at the folder. I needed her to believe that this folder contained the keys to her $40 million. I needed her to believe that her retirement fund, the reason she had killed Victor, the reason she was running, was sitting right here on my father's mahogany desk. "Agent Miller? Hi, listen, I cannot talk long. I have it. I found the offshore accounts. The ones under the name Desert Shade. Yes, all of it. The routing numbers, the passcodes. It was hidden in the piano bench." I paused. That was the specific bait. The piano. It connected the lie to her cover story. "No, she does not know I have it," I said, dropping my voice to a conspiratorial whisper that I knew she would strain to hear. "I am going to bring it to you tomorrow morning. I cannot leave tonight. It is too suspicious, but I will be at your office at 8 o'clock sharp. You can arrest her then. I just want immunity. I did not know Miller. I swear to God I did not know she was a monster." I hung up the phone and threw it onto the desk with a clatter. I put my head in my hands and let out a long, ragged exhale. It was the performance of a lifetime. I sat there for 5 minutes, letting the silence stretch out. I needed to give her time to process. She had a choice now. She could run immediately right this second, but she would leave without her money. Or she could stay, retrieve the ledger I had just claimed to have, and eliminate the only witness who could send her to prison for life. For Elena Rostova, that was not a choice. It was a to-do list. I stood up, grabbed the folder, and shoved it dramatically into my briefcase. I locked the briefcase, a flimsy lock that a child could pick, and slid it under the desk. Then I walked out to the kitchen. Elena was standing by the stove. She had a kettle on. She looked up when I entered. Her face was a mask of concern, the perfect picture of a worried wife. "Who were you talking to?" she asked softly. "Just work," I said, avoiding her eyes. "My boss. I told him I would be in tomorrow morning to sort out the leave of absence." "Oh," she said. "That is good. You should go. Routine is good." She turned back to the stove. "I am making some warm milk with honey. My mother used to make it for me when I could not sleep. You look exhausted, James. You should have some." Warm milk. It was such a cliché that I almost laughed. But in her mind it was efficient. Milk masks the taste of crushed pills better than water. Honey masks the bitterness. "That sounds great," I said. "Thanks, Nat. I will be in the living room." I walked into the living room and sat in my father's recliner. The house was dark, save for the lamp on the side table. I waited. This was the gamble. If she used a bullet, I was dead. If she used a knife, I was dead. But a risk analyst plays the odds, and the odds said she needed this to look like a suicide. She had already planted the jealous husband seed with the police. A suicide would close the case perfectly. A bullet wound would raise too many questions. She walked in 5 minutes later. She was holding a ceramic mug. Steam curled off the top. "Here," she said, placing it on the coaster next to me. "Drink it while it is hot. It will help you relax." She sat on the sofa opposite me, tucking her legs under her. She picked up a magazine and started flipping through it. She was watching me. I could feel her gaze on the side of my face. I picked up the mug. It was warm. It smelled of vanilla and something else, something chalky. "Thanks," I said. I brought the mug to my lips. I tilted it back. I let the warm liquid touch my sealed lips, but I did not swallow a drop. I made a swallowing motion with my throat. "It is good," I said. "Drink it all," she said, not looking up from the magazine. "You need the rest." I took another fake sip. And another. I needed to get rid of the liquid. I could not just hold a full mug and pretend to pass out. "Did you hear that?" I asked, suddenly, looking toward the window. "Hear what?" She looked up, startled. "Outside. By car." It sounded like footsteps. She turned her head toward the window. In that split second, I tipped the mug over the large potted ficus plant that stood next to the recliner. The milk splashed silently into the dark soil. I brought the mug back to my lap instantly. "I do not see anything, James," she said, turning back. "Must be the wind," I muttered. "I am just on edge." I pretended to finish the rest of the milk. I set the empty mug down on the table with a heavy thud. I started letting my eyelids droop. "I feel really tired all of a sudden." "It is the stress," she said soothingly. "Just close your eyes. Just rest." I leaned my head back against the leather. I let my jaw go slack. I slowed my breathing, making it deep and rhythmic. I counted the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. "James," she whispered. I did not move. "James?" A little louder. I stayed perfectly still. I focused on relaxing every muscle, making my body heavy. She stood up. I heard her footsteps on the carpet. Soft. Predatory. She stopped right in front of me. She grabbed my wrist. She lifted my arm and let it drop. I let it fall like a dead weight. It hit the armrest with a thud that hurt, but I did not flinch. She peeled back one of my eyelids. I rolled my eyes upward, showing only the white. It is a trick I learned in college to freak out my roommates. I prayed it would work on a professional killer. She let go of my eyelid. "Finally," she said. The voice was unrecognizable. It was not the soft whisper of Natalie. It was hard cold and utterly devoid of empathy. It was the voice of a woman who was taking out the trash. She walked away from me. I heard her go into the study. She was going for the briefcase. She was going for the fake ledger. I heard the snap of the latch, the rustle of papers. "Idiot," she muttered, keeping it in a folder labeled confidential. "You made it too easy." She walked back into the living room. I heard the beep of a phone. Not her iPhone. The burner. "It is done," she said. She was speaking Russian now. I do not speak Russian, but I had learned a few phrases in the last 24 hours while researching her profile. I recognized the tone. It was a status report. Then she switched to English. "He is down. I have the ledger. Yes, the whole file. No, he is not dead yet. I am going to stage it now. Carbon monoxide. Classic guilt suicide. He could not live with the shame of killing Victor. It fits the narrative." She paused. "I will be at the airstrip by 6. Have the plane ready. And tell the pilot I do not want any questions." She hung up. She came back to me. She grabbed me by the shoulders. "Up you go, honey," she grunted. She pulled me out of the chair. I kept my body limp. I am 180 pounds. She was 120. But she moved me with a terrifying strength. She hooked her arms under my armpits and dragged me backward. My heels dragged across the carpet, then the hardwood of the hallway. My head lolled to the side. I focused on my breathing. Shallow. Barely there. If I gasped, if I tensed, it was over. She opened the door to the garage. The air was cooler out here. It smelled of gasoline and old oil. She dragged me to the driver's side of my sedan. She opened the door and shoved me in. It was not gentle. She folded me into the seat like a piece of luggage. My head hit the steering wheel. I stayed limp. She leaned across me. I could smell her perfume, that lavender scent that used to make me smile. Now it smelled like a funeral home. She placed something on the dashboard, a piece of paper. "Sorry, James," she whispered. "But you were getting boring anyway." She keyed the ignition. The engine roared to life. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. She stepped back and slammed the car door shut. I heard her walk to the garage door controller on the wall. She disabled the safety sensor. I heard the distinct click. She hit the button to close the garage door. The heavy motor whirred, and the world outside disappeared as the door rumbled down, sealing me in. Total darkness. The only light came from the dashboard of the car. The engine was idling smoothly. The air conditioning vents were blowing cool air, but I knew that outside the car the invisible gas was already filling the room. I heard the door to the house open and close. The lock clicked. She was gone. She was inside, packing her bags, grabbing the fake ledger, and preparing to disappear with the money she thought she had recovered. I opened my eyes. The garage was filling with exhaust fumes. I could already smell it seeping in through the vents. I had minutes, maybe less. I looked at the piece of paper she had left on the dashboard. I picked it up. It was a handwritten note. "To my dearest Natalie, I cannot live with what I have done. The jealousy, the anger, it consumed me. I killed that man. I murdered him in cold blood because I thought you loved him. I am a monster. I am sorry for everything. Take care of Leo. Tell him his father loved him, but his father was broken. James. The handwriting was mine. It was a perfect match. The slant of the letters, the way I crossed my T's. She must have practiced for weeks. She had been planning this exit strategy long before Victor Vance showed up. Victor was just the catalyst, the excuse she needed to execute the plan. She had turned my life into a tragedy, and she had written the final line. But she had made one miscalculation, a rounding error. She assumed the variable, me, was static. She assumed I was the same man who fell asleep watching documentaries on the couch. She did not account for the fact that fear evolves. I reached for the door handle. I did not open it yet. I needed to wait. If I opened the garage door now, the noise would alert her. She would come back out, see me alive, and she would finish the job with the Colt. I had to wait until she left. I looked at the dashboard clock, 11:45 at night, the exact same time the nightmare had started 48 hours ago. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened the app, connected to the button camera I had hidden in the office. The screen loaded. A black and white feed appeared. There she was. She was in the office. She was frantic now. She had the fake dossier open on the desk. She was typing furiously on her laptop, likely trying to input the nonsense codes I had invented. I watched her face. The confusion. The growing panic. She typed a string of numbers. She hit enter. She waited. She slammed her fist on the desk. "Invalid," I whispered to myself. "It is all invalid, Elena." She grabbed the phone, her burner. She dialed. "It is not working," she hissed. "The codes are wrong. It says access denied. No, I am typing it right." Typing. He must have encrypted it. Or this is the wrong file. She looked at the camera. For a second it felt like she was looking right at me through the screen. "He played me," she said softly. The realization was dawning on her. The accountant played me. She swept the papers off the desk in a violent motion. They scattered across the floor like confetti. She stood up. She grabbed her bag. She was leaving. She realized there was no money to be had here. She had to cut her losses and run before the FBI meeting tomorrow morning. I watched her run out of the office. I switched to the hallway camera. I saw her heading for the back door. She was not taking the car. She had a pickup arrangement. I waited until I heard the faint sound of a car engine outside. Not mine. A different car. A getaway car. I pulled the handle of my car door. I stumbled out into the fume-filled garage. My head was spinning. The CO was already working. My legs felt like rubber. I reached for the garage door button on the wall. I smashed my fist against it. The motor whined. The door began to lift. Fresh, cold night air rushed in, swirling with the exhaust. I collapsed onto the concrete floor, gasping, sucking in the oxygen, like a drowning man breaking the surface. I lay there for a minute, coughing, my lungs burning. I was alive. She was gone. She thought I was dead. She thought she had won. I rolled onto my back and looked up at the ceiling of the garage. "Check," I whispered. I stood up, using the car for support. I walked back into the house. It was silent again. But this time, the silence was not terrifying. It was the silence of an empty battlefield. I walked to the kitchen. I poured the rest of the milk from the carton down the sink. I rinsed the pot. Then, I went to the alarm panel by the back door. I entered the code. 7-2-9-4. System armed. I was not the victim anymore. I was the hunter, and I had one thing she didn't have. I had the recording. I had the confession. I had the attempted murder on tape. And I knew exactly where she was going. Flight 492. MEX. Thursday. 0600. I looked at the clock. Midnight. I had 6 hours to get to the airport. I had 6 hours to catch a ghost. I walked out to the driveway. I did not take my car. It was a crime scene now. I took my father's truck. The keys were hanging by the door. I climbed into the cab. The engine roared to life, a deep, guttural growl compared to the purr of my sedan. I backed out of the driveway. I did not look back at the house. James Garcia, the risk analyst, died in that garage. The man driving the truck was someone else entirely. The heavy metal door of the garage had clicked shut, sealing me in absolute darkness. The only illumination came from the dashboard of my sedan, casting a ghostly green glow over the leather interior. The engine was purring, a smooth mechanical hum that masked the sound of the invisible poison filling the air. Carbon monoxide, colorless, odorless, the silent killer. Natalie, Elena, had calculated this perfectly. It was clean. It was quiet. It fit the profile of a despondent husband who couldn't live with his guilt. But she had made a critical error. She assumed I was already unconscious. As soon as I heard the distinct click of the deadbolt sliding home on the door, leading back into the house, I opened my eyes. I didn't gasp. I didn't panic. I held my breath, my lungs burning with the need for oxygen, but I refused to inhale the tainted air. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my mind was icy clear. The risk analyst was gone. The survivalist had taken the wheel. I looked at my wrist. My smartwatch was glowing in the dark. I had synced it to the home security hub 3 months ago, a gadget I thought was just a toy at the time. Now it was my lifeline. I swiped the screen. My fingers were trembling not from fear, but from the adrenaline dumping into my bloodstream. I found the icon I needed. It was a red shield with an exclamation point. Panic mode. This wasn't just an alarm. It was the nuclear option. It was designed to alert the monitoring station, the local police, and every neighbor within a 2-block radius that something catastrophic was happening. It bypasses the silent countdown. It goes straight to maximum volume. I pressed the icon. Boom. The sound was physical. It wasn't just a noise. It was a shockwave. The external sirens mounted on the eaves of the house erupted with a piercing, warbling shriek that vibrated through the chassis of the car. The strobe lights installed above the garage door began to flash, blinding white pulses that cut through the darkness like lightning. I didn't wait. I swiped to the next screen on my watch. Garage door control. I hit open. The motor overhead groaned, fighting against the locking mechanism for a split second before the chain caught. The heavy door began to shudder and rise. Fresh, cold night air rushed in along the floor, swirling with the exhaust fumes. It tasted like salvation. I didn't wait for the door to fully open. As soon as there was a gap of 3 feet, I kicked my car door open. I scrambled out, falling onto the concrete floor, coughing violently as I purged the bad air from my lungs. I grabbed my phone, the one recording the audio, from my pocket. I gripped it so hard, I thought the screen would crack. I didn't run away. Running was what a victim did. I wasn't a victim anymore. I scrambled to my feet using the hood of the car for leverage. The alarm was still screaming, a deafening, chaotic rhythm that disoriented everything. Whoop, whoop, whoop. I heard the door to the house fly open. She was back. Elena stood in the doorway, connecting the garage to the kitchen. The light from the kitchen spilled out behind her, silhouetting her frame. She wasn't holding the bags anymore. She wasn't holding the fake ledger. She was staring at me. For a fraction of a second, I saw genuine shock on her face. The dead husband was standing up. The suicide had failed. The equation hadn't balanced. Then, the shock evaporated. In its place was a snarl of pure animalistic rage. "You stubborn son of a bitch," she hissed. I couldn't hear the words over the siren, but I read them on her lips. She didn't retreat. She didn't run for her getaway car. She knew that with the alarm blaring, the police were already en route. She had minutes, maybe seconds, to finish the narrative. If I was alive when the police arrived, her story fell apart. If I was dead, she could still claim I attacked her, and she fought back. She reached down. With a fluid motion that blurred in the strobe lights, she pulled something from her boot. It was a knife. A combat blade, matte black, serrated on one side. It wasn't a kitchen knife. It was a weapon of war. She lunged. She covered the distance between the door and the car in 2 strides. She didn't run like a civilian. She moved like water, low and fast. I barely had time to react. I threw my left arm up instinctively to block. The blade slashed down. I felt a searing hot line of pain erupt across my shoulder. It felt like a brand. The fabric of my shirt parted, and warm blood instantly soaked my sleeve. I roared in pain, staggering back against the side mirror of the car. The mirror snapped off with a loud crack. She didn't stop. She pivoted on her heel, using the momentum to spin and slash again, aiming for my gut. I sucked my stomach and the tip of the knife grazing my belt buckle, sparking against the metal. I am 6'1". I weigh 180 pounds. Elena is 5'5". In a normal world, I have the advantage. But in this garage, amidst the flashing lights and screaming sirens, I was a clumsy bear fighting a viper. She was faster, sharper, and trained to kill. "Die!" she screamed, her face contorted into a mask of hatred. "Just die, James!" She thrust the knife forward again, aiming for my chest. I didn't dodge this time. I stepped into the attack. It was the only risk analysis that made sense. If I backed up, she would slice me to ribbons. I had to close the distance. I caught her wrist with my right hand. The impact jarred my bones. Her grip was iron. The tip of the knife was inches from my throat, quivering with the force of her push. We locked eyes. Hers were black pits of dilated pupils. There was no humanity there. No Natalie. Just the mechanic at work. "You were boring," she gritted out through clenched teeth, spitting the words in my face. "You were so boring." "I know," I grunted, using my weight to force her arm back. "That was the point." I slammed my forehead into the bridge of her nose. Crack. It was a dirty move. A brawler's move. But it worked. She cried out, blood spurting from her nose, her eyes tearing up reflexively. Her grip on the knife loosened for a microsecond. I didn't let go of her wrist. I twisted it. I twisted it hard against the joint way past the point of resistance. She screamed. A high, piercing sound that cut through the alarm. The knife clattered to the concrete floor. I kicked it away. It skittered under the car. She was disarmed. But she wasn't done. She raked her fingernails across my face, going for my eyes. I felt skin tear on my cheek. She kneed me in the groin. The pain was blinding. I doubled over, gasping. She scrambled back, looking for the knife. But then, over the wail of the house alarm, a new sound cut through the night. Sirens. Approaching fast. The distinct yelp of police cruisers turning onto our street. Mr. Henderson. The old man had actually done it. He had called the cavalry. Elena froze. She looked at the open garage door. She looked at the flashing blue and red lights reflecting off the wet driveway. She looked at me, bleeding and panting, blocking her path to the car. She knew. She calculated the odds in a nanosecond. She couldn't kill me and escape before they stormed the house. If she ran, she would be chased down. So she did the only thing left. She changed the script. The transformation was instant and terrifying. The killer vanished. The predator dissolved. She grabbed the collar of her own blouse and ripped it open, buttons popping and scattering across the floor. She raked her own nails down her neck, leaving angry red welts. She slapped herself hard across the face once, twice. Then she screamed, "Help! Help me, please!" It was a blood-curdling scream of terror. It was the scream of a woman being murdered. She threw herself backward, crashing into the workbench, knocking over jars of screws and tools. She curled into a ball on the floor, sobbing hysterically. "Don't kill me! James, please, I'm sorry, I'm sorry!" I stood there swaying, clutching my bleeding shoulder. I watched her in horror. She was framing me in real time. She was creating a crime scene where I was the monster. "Drop the weapon! Drop it now!" The shout came from the driveway. I turned. 3 police officers were advancing up the driveway, guns drawn, flashlights cutting through the gloom. They were in tactical formation. I looked down at my hands. They were empty, but they were covered in blood. My blood and hers from her nose. "Get on the ground! Do it now!" the lead officer screamed. It wasn't Miller. It was a young guy, terrified and trigger-happy. I looked at Elena. She was peering through her fingers, checking the angle of the officers. Then she wailed again. "He has a knife! He tried to kill me!" The officer's finger tightened on the trigger. The barrel of his Glock was pointed center mass at my chest. "I said get on the ground or I will shoot!" My brain screamed at me to run. My body wanted to fight. But the risk analyst grabbed the controls. "Do not run. Do not fight. You will die." I slowly raised my empty hands. The blood ran down my arms, dripping onto the concrete. "I am unarmed!" I yelled, my voice cracking. "I am unarmed!" "Get on your knees. Hands behind your head." I sank to my knees. The concrete was cold and wet. I interlocked my fingers behind my head. Elena was sobbing louder now, crawling toward the officers. "He is crazy. He found out about the money and he snapped. He tried to gas me in the car." She was spinning the story. She was using the exact setup she had planned for my suicide, the car, the gas, and flipping it. She was claiming I tried to kill her. The officers swarmed. 2 of them went to Elena, shielding her, helping her up. "It is okay, ma'am. We have got you." The 3rd officer, the young one, rushed me. He kicked my legs apart and slammed my face into the concrete. "Don't move! You are under arrest!" He grabbed my wrists and wrenched them behind my back. I felt the cold bite of the handcuffs ratcheting tight. "You have the right to remain silent," he began to recite. I couldn't let them take me away. If they put me in a squad car, if they let her leave in an ambulance, she would vanish. She would kill the paramedic, steal the ambulance, and disappear. Or she would stick to the story and I would be buried under a mountain of false evidence before morning. I had to play my ace. "Check my pocket!" I screamed into the pavement, my mouth tasting of oil and grit. "Shut up!" the officer yelled, pressing his knee into my spine. "Check my front pocket!" I roared, desperate. "I have a recording. She is lying. Check the phone." I said shut up. "Officer!" I shouted, turning my head to the side so I could see him. "My name is James Garcia. I am the homeowner. That woman is Elena Rostova. She is a federal fugitive. Listen to the recording." The name Rostova hung in the air. It was a heavy name, a name that sounded like trouble. The officer hesitated. "He is lying!" Elena shrieked from the safety of the other officers. "He is hallucinating. He took pills. Just take him away." Her desperation was the tell. She was too loud, too insistent. "Check the phone," I gasped, the air leaving my lungs. "Please, just press play. If I am lying, you can shoot me." The officer on my back looked at his partner. The partner, an older sergeant, looked at Elena, then at me. He saw the genuine terror in my eyes. He saw the calculation in hers. "Check it, Miller," the sergeant said. Miller, not the sheriff, just a rookie with the same name, reached into my front pocket. He pulled out my phone. The screen was still on. The recording app was open. The waveform was still scrolling red. "Press play," I whispered. Miller looked at the phone. He tapped the stop button. Then he tapped play. The sound was tinny, coming from the small speaker, but in the sudden silence of the garage it was deafening. "It is done. He is down. I have the ledger. Yes, the whole file. No, he is not dead yet. I am going to stage it now. Carbon monoxide, classic guilt suicide." Elena's voice, cold, Russian accent slipping in. The voice of a killer. "I will be at the airstrip by 6. Have the plane ready." The recording stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than the garage door. The sergeant looked up from the phone. He looked at Elena. She wasn't crying anymore. She wasn't trembling. The act had dropped. She was standing there wrapped in a blanket the medic had given her, and her face was stone. She looked at the sergeant. Then she looked at me. "You audited me," she said softly. "You actually audited me." The sergeant pulled his weapon and pointed it at her. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle. Put your hands where I can see them." Elena laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a laugh. "It was a good play, James," she said, ignoring the gun pointed at her chest. "I underestimated the variable. I forgot that even a boring man can be dangerous when he is scared. "On the ground!" the sergeant yelled. "Now!" Elena sighed. She looked at the open garage door at the night sky beyond the flashing lights. For a second, I thought she was going to run. I thought she was going to try and take them all on. But she didn't. She was a professional. She knew when the checkmate had happened. She slowly raised her hands. "I want a lawyer," she said calmly. "And I want to speak to the feds. I have information on the organizatsia. I want a deal." As the officers moved in to cuff her, she didn't look at them. She kept her eyes on me. I was still lying on the concrete, bleeding, handcuffed and exhausted. But as I watched them snap the steel bracelets onto the wrists of the woman I had married, I knew the calculation was finally complete. The account was closed. The balance was zero. "James Garcia," she said as they shoved her toward the cruiser. "You should have drunk the milk." I watched them put her in the back of the car. I watched the door slam shut. The rookie officer helped me up. He unlocked my cuffs. "I am sorry, Mr. Garcia," he mumbled. "We didn't know." "It is okay," I said, rubbing my raw wrists. "I didn't know either." I stood there in the driveway, the rain mixing with the blood on my shirt. I watched the police car drive away, taking my wife, my enemy, my nightmare with it. It was over. But as I looked at the empty street, I knew it wasn't really over. You don't put a woman like Elena Rostova in a cage and expect her to stay there. And you don't declare war on the Russian mob without consequences. I touched the pocket where my phone was. I had won the battle. But the war had just begun. Detective Rodriguez arrived just as the uniformed officers were pulling Elena toward the cruiser. He stepped out of his unmarked sedan, his raincoat flapping in the wind, looking like a man who had expected this outcome, but hoped he was wrong. He walked straight up to Sergeant Miller, who was holding my phone in an evidence bag. "Is it true?" Rodriguez asked, his eyes moving from the handcuffed woman to me. "It is all here, Detective," Miller said. "The homeowner recorded a confession. Attempted murder. Staged suicide. It is airtight." Rodriguez took the bag. He pressed the button through the plastic. The voice of the woman I had married filled the night air one last time. "I will make it look like a suicide." It was cold, clinical, and undeniable. It cut through the ambient noise of the radio chatter and the distant thunder like a razor blade. Rodriguez looked at Elena. She was not struggling anymore. She was standing tall, her chin raised, looking at the scene with a detached kind of boredom. "Elena Rostova," Rodriguez said, testing the name. "We have been looking for a ghost for 10 years. I never thought I would find her playing house in the suburbs." Elena slowly turned her head to look at me. The police lights washed over her face, painting her in alternating strokes of blue and red. There was no love left in her eyes. There was no anger either. There was just a profound, icy disappointment. "You win, James," she said. Her voice was steady, loud enough for everyone to hear. "But do not think this makes you special. You were just a necessary inconvenience." "Why?" I asked. It was the only word I could manage. My throat felt like it had been scrubbed with sandpaper. 10 years, Nat. Was any of it real?" She laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "Real? The piano lessons were real. The cookies were real. But me? No. I needed a cover, James. I needed someone so incredibly average, so painfully predictable, that no one would ever look twice at his wife. You were perfect. You were the perfect camouflage." She leaned forward against the restraint of the officer, holding her arm, her face twisting into a sneer of absolute contempt. "You never deserved me," she spat. "You boring, pathetic accountant. You should have just drunk the milk and died happy." The officer shoved her into the back of the cruiser. She didn't look back. She didn't look at the house. She didn't look at me. As the car pulled away, I realized she wasn't thinking about us. She was already calculating her next move, planning her defense, working the angles. She was Elena Rostova until the end. The next few hours were a blur of procedural chaos. The house that had been my sanctuary was turned inside out. This time, it wasn't a crime scene investigation for a break-in. It was a federal raid. Rodriguez led the team. They brought in dogs. They brought in thermal scanners. They didn't trust the walls, and neither did I. I sat on the bumper of an ambulance, a paramedic, stitching up the slice on my shoulder. I watched them dismantle my life. "Mr. Garcia?" I looked up. Rodriguez was walking out of the front door. He was holding a heavy sealed evidence bag. "You were right about the money," he said. "But it wasn't in the piano bench. It was under it." He explained that the K-9 unit had alerted to a spot on the floorboards in the living room directly beneath where the grand piano stood. They had pried up the hardwood. Underneath, nestled between the joists of the foundation, was a waterproof safe. Inside, they found nearly $2 million in cash, euros, Swiss francs, and American dollars. They found 6 passports each with a different name and a different nationality, but all bearing the face of the woman I slept next to every night. There was also a hard drive. Rodriguez said the cyber forensics team was already drooling over it. They suspected it contained the encryption keys to the $40 million she had laundered for the Organizatia, the leverage she had been keeping to buy her freedom, or her life. "She was ready to go," Rodriguez said, shaking his head. "If you hadn't triggered that alarm, she would have been on a plane to Mexico by sunrise, and you would be a tragic headline in the morning paper." I looked at the house. The front door was hanging off its hinges. The windows were dark. It looked like a corpse. "It is over, isn't it?" I asked. Rodriguez sighed. "For her? Yes. With the murder of Victor Vance, the attempted murder of you, the fraud, the money laundering, she is never seeing the outside of a cell again. The feds are already fighting over who gets to prosecute her." He put a hand on my good shoulder. "Go get your son James. Go be a father. That is the only job you have left tonight." The drive to the Eagle Eye Scout camp usually took 4 hours. I made it in 5. I drove slowly. I stopped for coffee I didn't drink. I was terrified of the destination. How do you tell an 8-year-old boy that his mother is gone? How do you tell him that the person who tucked him in and checked for monsters under the bed was the monster? I pulled into the camp entrance, just as the sun was breaking over the tree line. The world looked obscenely beautiful. The birds were singing. The light was golden. It felt wrong that the day could start so brightly after the night I had just survived. I met Sarah, the camp counselor, at the main office. She looked at my bandaged arm, my bruised face, and the exhaustion etched into my skin. She didn't ask questions. She just nodded and went to get Leo. When I saw him walking down the path holding his backpack, looking sleepy and confused, my heart broke all over again. He looked so much like her. He had her eyes. He had her smile. "Dad!" he yelled, running toward me. "What are you doing here? Is camp over?" I knelt down on the gravel path. I winced as my knees hit the stones, but I forced a smile. I hugged him tighter than I had ever hugged anyone in my life. I smelled the campfire smoke in his hair and the pine needles on his clothes. He smelled like innocence. "Hey, buddy," I said, pulling back to look at him. "Camp isn't over, but we have to go." "Where is Mom?" he asked, looking past me at the truck. "Did she come?" This was the moment, the lie that would define our future. I could not tell him the truth. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He could not carry the weight of knowing his mother was a contract killer. He needed a tragedy he could understand, not a thriller he couldn't process. Mom is sick, Leo," I said. My voice was steady. I was auditing the risk of the truth, and the risk was too high. She had to go away to a special hospital, far away. The doctors say she needs to be there for a long, long time. Leo's face crumbled. "Is she going to die?" "No," I said firmly. "She is safe, but we cannot see her. Not for a while. It is just you and me now, okay? We are the team." He started to cry. I held him. I let him cry into my shirt right over the bandage where she had tried to stab me. I absorbed his pain, just like I had absorbed her lies. "I have got you," I whispered. "I have got you, Leo." 6 months later, I signed the closing papers on the house in Oak Creek. I sold it for 20% under market value. I didn't care. I just wanted to be rid of it. I couldn't walk through the hallway without seeing the ghost of Victor Vance's arm. I couldn't sit in the living room without smelling the phantom scent of carbon monoxide. I couldn't look at the garage without hearing the scream of the alarm. We moved to a city 3 hours south, a college town. Smaller, quieter, but vibrant. We bought a townhouse. No big yard to maintain. No attic to store secrets in. I kept my job at Apex Global, but I work remotely now. I requested a transfer to the fraud detection unit. My boss was hesitant at first given the personal tragedy I had been through, but my performance numbers convinced him. I am better at my job than I ever was before. I see things other analysts miss. I see the patterns in the chaos. I see the lies in the numbers. But the paranoia didn't leave when we moved. It just changed shape. I checked the locks on our new front door 3 times every night. I installed a security system that rivals Fort Knox, but I didn't share the code with anyone, not even the cleaning lady. I don't hire babysitters I haven't vetted with a private investigator. When I date, which is rare, I find myself analyzing every word, every gesture. Is she too perfect? Is her story too consistent? Why is she asking about my work? I know it is unfair. I know I am damaged. But I also know that I am alive. One Tuesday evening in November, I was sitting in our new living room. Leo was on the floor, building a complex Lego spaceship. He was humming a tune, one of the songs Natalie used to play on the piano. It hurt to hear it, but I didn't stop him. I had the news on the television, the volume turned low. The anchor woman's face was serious. A graphic appeared on the screen behind her. It was a courtroom sketch. Elena Rostova sentenced. I turned up the volume. The woman formerly known as Natalie Garcia was sentenced today to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, the reporter said. Rostova, a high-ranking associate of the Russian Organizatsiya, remained silent throughout the sentencing. Federal prosecutors called her one of the most dangerous financial criminals and enforcers they have ever apprehended. Her capture has led to the dismantling of a massive money-laundering ring across the Midwest. The screen cut to footage of Elena being led out of the courthouse. She was wearing an orange jumpsuit. Her hair was cut short. She looked older, harder. As she passed the cameras, she looked directly into the lens. For a brief second, the mask slipped. She didn't look like a monster. She looked like a woman who had gambled everything on a pair of dice and rolled snake eyes. She looked tired. I watched her disappear into the transport van. "Dad!" I jumped. Leo was looking at me. "What are you watching?" I grabbed the remote and turned off the television. The screen went black, swallowing Elena Rostova and the past 10 years of my life. "Nothing, buddy," I said. "Just boring grown-up stuff." I slid off the couch and sat on the floor next to him. I picked up a blue Lego brick. "Need help with the engine?" I asked. Leo smiled. "Yeah, it needs to be strong, for the hyperdrive." "Strong is good," I said. "We can make it strong." I looked at my son. He was happy. He was safe. He had forgotten the details of that night, or perhaps repressed them. He believed his mother was ill. He believed his father was a hero who took care of him. He didn't know that his father was the man who trapped his mother. He didn't know that every time I looked at him, I checked his wrists for a barcode that wasn't there. I had lost my wife. I had lost my innocence. I had lost the illusion that the world was a safe, predictable place where math solved everything. But as I snapped the plastic brick into place, locking it tight, I realized I had won the only thing that mattered. I survived the variable. James Garcia learned the hardest lesson of all. You think the house is the safest place on earth. You think the walls keep the bad things out. But sometimes the most dangerous enemy isn't the one standing outside your window in the rain. It is the one holding the keys, sleeping in your bed, and smiling at you over a cup of warm milk. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening on your commute at the gym, or maybe alone in the dark like James? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this ride, please subscribe to the Calm Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach more people who need a little thrill in their day. Stay safe, check your locks, and I will see you in the next story.